For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial pound law, that is pound 529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. Hey, warmer brotherly low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We are going to be going guest-free today, mainly because we've got ourselves finally a loaded slate of college basketball, north of 80 games on the board, doing nothing but giving you guys picks and analysis on all of these games as we hit some bank shots. So we are going to go with no recap for today. It was a very small slate of college basketball for Friday. If anything pressing happened on that Friday, well, we are going to recap that on the podcast tomorrow. But we've got ourselves a lot of money to be made on these games. We've got ourselves a lot of games to be broken down. So we are going to leave this podcast to that. And if you ever do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We are going to be going in Las Vegas tradition order, by the way, with all these picks, and that's where we go with the bigger games on the board first. For the most part, it is in time order, and then the extra games, the games involving the MEAC, the SWAC, the Atlantic Sun, the Big South, along with also the Southern Conference, the Patriot League. I think that I got them all, the America East as well. Those will be the games I hit in the final segment. We're going to do 2 segments of the normal Las Vegas betting board, which I believe that is 53 games in total, so probably like 30 in the first part, 23 in the second part, and then with those extra games, so it'll keep things all nice, neat, clean, and easy for you guys. We've got no more beating around the bush on this podcast as well. We'll take 2 breaks along the way, so you're just getting straight up a lot of college basketball coverage, a lot of winners, and let's get things started as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
We get things started with 601, 602 on the card. It is Memphis on the road against Clemson. Clemson a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite. Totals anywhere between 144.5 to a 145, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Memphis. I did set them as an underdog of 6 points with Memphis. Certainly less than savory what we saw a few days ago against Arkansas State, but you do have to love the fact that PJ Haggerty has been able to give this team over 20 points per game. For Memphis, once again, big issue for this team, it has been over the last few years, has been the turnovers. They're turning the ball over nearly 14 times per game, but they do have quite a bit in terms of three-point shooting. As a matter of fact, they're a top 5 team in all three-point shooting, and I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression here. Big reason why I did set my total at 144. I'm diving in on the under, and be mindful that this is an 11 a.m. Eastern time tip, so this is an early one to say the least, as you got Tyrese Hunter right now shooting 49% from three-point range. And as a matter of fact, every single player for Memphis that has made at least 1 3 that is averaging more than 4 points per game, shooting at least 36.4% from three-point range. It's a little bit of a top-heavy team. They don't necessarily have the biggest rotation in the world, but they've been able to do a solid job down low as well. You've been able to get right around about 6.5 or so rebounds per game out of Dane Danger. He's giving you double figures. Tyrese Hunter shooting 49% from 3, 3.5 assists, 15 points per game. Again, would love to see a little bit more depth out of this team because they've been without guys like Tariq Smith and company. I believe they transferred out before the start of the season, but still they've been able to do a relatively effective job. And then on the Clemson side of things, Ian Shefflin has been one of the best rebounders in all of college basketball because we always talk about the efficiency of Clemson, and that's so true. They are a top 50 team in terms of points points scored on a per possession basis. They has ball shooting about 38.5% from three-point range, while allowing opponents to shoot just 30% from distance. They've really locked down there, but Ian Shufflin, 12.5 rebounds per game. That is a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. A little bit more balance with this team, especially with Wacky Zachy, Jaden Zachary, being able to give this team right around about 3 assists per contest, 8.5 points per game. But what is striking about this team is that Shufflin is actually leading the way in terms of assists per game, like the versatility of Victor Locke and 11 points, but also does give you 1.7 blocks per game as well. And that's been a big difference for this Clemson team, is right now only giving up about 62.5 points per game. We're always used to seeing Clemson being a team that's pretty solid on offense. Defensively, they leave a little bit more of something to be desired, but this year they've really been able to step to the plate, albeit against some lesser competition, but even in that game against Penn State, held them down there. Clemson, 34th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I'm going to be willing to go under on this game. That said, here at North of 6, going to be willing to take those points with Memphis. 603, 604 on the betting board. This is from Gamebridge Fieldhouse, as you've got Purdue, and they are going to be playing against Texas A&M. A&M is a 2.5 to 3 point dog. Total on this game, it is 143 to 143.5, and I did set my total at 136.5. I'm in on the under. Still have a Purdue team that is one of the slower teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, with this being in a bigger field house / a bigger gym in general. I do think that that's going to throw off the sight lines just a little bit here. I do think that Purdue is going to be able to work on that defense a little bit more, as Purdue has been a bit hit or miss with this regard, a whopping 178th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But also have a Texas A&M team that was in the bottom 30 nationally in terms of three-point shooting percentage 8 seasons ago, and this year they've been a little bit better. You've been able to have Wade Taylor, the fourth, be able to supply this team with north of 14 points per contest. You've also had Zariq Phelps come in. He's given the team 14 points per game, but he's not going to give you really anything from the outside. Does a nice job being able to slash to the hoop, but he's a little bit more of a defensive stopper, does a solid job being able to generate some steals, what have you. In Texas A&M, as we know, this is a team that's an absolute menace on the glass, but even though this is an anti-air quotes here neutral court game, this is happening out there in the great state of Indiana, so that gives Purdue a nice edge, and that's a big reason why I did set them as more of a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay with them. Felt like they were able to get right in that game against Maryland, and Trey Kaufman run. He's been a stat sheet sufferer, 19 points, 6 half boards. He's able to pop it from 3, and for Purdue, they are a top 10 team in all of college basketball. They're 40.8% 3-point shooting percentage. For them, every single one of their players is averaging at least 4.3 points per game, shooting at least 42% from 3-point range. And it should be going downward a little bit, but guys like Miles Colvin and Cameron Heide are combining for 14 points per game. They've been able to combine to shoot north of 44.5% from 3-point range. Braden Smith, all sorts of versatility, 9 assists per game. Now, the one thing that can slow Purdue down is what we saw against Penn State about a week or so ago. The fact that some of these teams, they do a good job of generating turnovers, and Texas A&M, they're not great, but they're not terrible at that. They should be able to own the glass. Texas A&M was number 1 in the country last year in terms of offensive rebound rate. Not quite number 1 this year, but Henry Coleman, Solomon Washington, Anderson Garcia are all supplying the team with at least 6 rebounds per game, but they themselves do turn the ball over about 12.5 times per game. That lack of 3-point shooting, I think, is going to lead to a little bit of a low-scoring slog, and I do think the Trey Kaufman run does just enough down low to be able to get the job done. So, 1 to lay up to 4 with Purdue, and with regards to total, set mine at a 136.5. I'm in on the under. I'll be writing up this game. 605, 606 on the card. Ohio State is going to be playing against Auburn. This is going to be happening out there at State Farm Arena, and right now Auburn 11.5 to 12-point favorites. So on this game is 153.5 to 154.5, and I'm going to be writing up the under. I feel like this total should be closer to more in that neighborhood of a 149.5. You have an Ohio State team that has been in the top 30 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I think that that'll keep them just lively enough to be able to hold in there. I set my line at 11.5, so 12 plus I'm going to be willing to take those points with Ohio State. Ohio State has been able to get quite a bit out of the backcourt, and Bruce Thornton, who's been able to give you 16 points per contest. 3-point shooting for Ohio State has been very good as well, shooting 41.5% from 3, and I think that that is going to be dropping off the table as Thornton is shooting over 50% from 3-point range. John Mobley Jr. shooting 55% from 3-point range. These are just unsustainable numbers in my opinion, but I do think that with what you've got down low, Tevin Royal being able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, Sean Stewart about 5.5 points, 6 boards, that's just enough to hold in there against an Auburn team that has had G&I Broom be one of the best players in all of college basketball. He's supplying the team with 19.5 points, 3.5 assists, 12 rebounds, 3 blocks per game. He's able to pop threes. He's not necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooter, but just the fact that he has that versatility is so big. Dylan Cardwell, he's been a really nice offensive player for an Auburn team that in an SEC where we're seeing these teams really crank up the tempo, it's not like Auburn's offensive success and they're scoring right around about 87 points per game. It's due to the fact that they just crank it up and down the floor. They're actually about closer to about 225th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they played against some up-tempo teams thus far this season. You've been able to have Miles Kelly come in and give the team double figures. Currently, he's shooting 49% from 3, and again, with Auburn, they've got 3 out of their top 4 scorers shooting at least 42.5% from distance. I think that that's going to start to tail off a little bit as well. This is going to be at State Farm Arena as well, so you've got a little bit of a bigger venue than a lot of these college kids are used to as well, so I do think that that's going to hurt the shooting lines. Just a little bit of a pair of teams that have been able to shoot it very well from 3-point range, and certainly with Auburn, I do think that their defense is going to be better in this one rather than that of Ohio State. I do think that they execute better on offense, but I think that we're getting a little bit too lofty in a game that, again, I think that there's going to be some 3-point shooting regression on both sides. So did set my total more around a 149.5. I'll be writing up the under, and at 12 plus, I'm willing to take those points with Ohio State. 607, 608 on the betting board. This is another game that I'm writing up. DePaul is going to be playing against Wichita State. Wichita State opened up as a 3-point dog. Now they're between 3.5 and 4-point underdogs. So on this game between 149.5 to a 151, and I'm going to be writing up DePaul laying the number. I'm willing to go up to 7 with them. DePaul, less than savory outcome a few days ago against Providence. They had that game, and then they completely blew it. I don't think that we're going to see a repeat here against a Wichita State team that just hasn't been good on offense. Outside the top 140 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. When Paul Mills' teams have been very good, going back to his days over at Roller Roberts, typically they were shooting very well from 3-point range, and this year they're shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range. Now, one thing that Wichita State does do is protect the ball. They're a top 25 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Have a pair of guys out there, Justin Hill along with Harnell Beverly, who have done a nice job running this offense. Combined 3 steals, 6.6 assists, 24.5 points per game. I mean, that's been rock solid, but both of these guys shooting below 27% from 3-point range. Your main guy from the outside has actually been Corey Washington, the transfer from St. Peter's. He shot 40% from 3, 13 points per contest after he shot just 30% from distance season ago. So, while I do think that most of these guys are going to be able to ascend with their 3-point shooting, for Wichita State, that should be in a little bit of decline. You've got Quincy Ballard down low, who's able to give you about 2.5 blocks per game, but for DePaul, this has actually been one of your better rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Top 40 with that regard, while Wichita State hovering more in that neighborhood about 190th. Thought that Bajan Cortez coming in from Oklahoma was going to give this team a little bit more, and for DePaul, it was very clear what they were looking to do in the transfer portal with Chris Holtman. Bring in 3-point shooting, and that's exactly what they've done. They're shooting as a collective 39% from 3. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. They are dealing with CJ Gunn being in and out of the fold, but Isaiah Rivera, 13 points, shooting 44% from 3-point range. You've got Connor Enright, who's right now in the top 10 in all of college basketball with regards to assists per game. He's been doling out about 7.3 assists per game. Would like to see DePaul be able to tame down on the turnovers just a little bit, as Enright has been turning the ball over 3+ times per contest and has had 4+ turnovers in each of the last 2 games, but team still shooting north of 39% from 3 with David Skogman. Off his versatility, 7 boards, 10.5 points. At 6'10" last year, he shot 45% from 3. This year, he's closer to 48.5% with his 3-point shooting percentage. Wichita State has been a relatively solid team at being able to guard the arc, but they themselves have been a little bit hit or miss in terms of their defense. Offense has been able to ascend just a little bit more, but much of that has been against lesser competition, against your likes of Alcorn State and company. So very tricky spot here with regards to total. I did set mine at a 147.5. Wichita State looking to play up tempo, but we have just seen their 3-point shooting be just all over the place. I do think that DePaul is doing for a little bit of regression with regards to that 3-point shooting percentage as well, so I'm in on the under, but with regards to write-up, I'm going to be willing to lay with DePaul. 6-9, 6-10 on the betting board. It is Ryder, and they play us at Stony Brook. Stony Brook is an underdog of 8.5 points. So on this game between 135.5 to a 136, and I did set this line at an 8.5 myself, so going to be waiting on a little bit of line movement here at an 8 or less. I'm willing to lay with Ryder, and I was seeing very early on something closer to a 7.5 to an 8. I would be willing to lay that with Ryder. This has just been a not so great year for Stony Brook. Stony Brook was actually your best cover 8 team in all of college basketball 8 seasons ago, but they lose 4 of their top 5 scores from a year ago. They've really been looking in the backcourt to Joe Octave to do a little bit of everything. Comes in from Holy Cross, and he's been able to supply the team with 13.5 points per game, but he's also shooting 21.5% from 3-point range. On the outside, CJ Luster is shooting 40% from 3. You just don't have a lot from the outside. This team is well outside the top 315 in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage at 27.5%. Down low, Andre 3000 Snotty has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, but Ben White, who was over at William & Mary a few seasons ago, well, he's been able to give you about 8.5 points, 5 boards per contest. You just haven't been able to get a ton down low from this team either, and Ingram squared should be able to win the day for this Rider bunch. As Tariq Ingram, he's been able to give you about 7 boards, 11 points per game. F.E. Wes Ingram, he's supplying the team with about 4 boards per contest as well. Both of these guys have been nice in the post now for Rider because they do lose their main facilitator and Corey McKeithen from a season ago. That's been a little bit wonky for them as they're only shooting about 28% from 3 and turning it over 13.5 times per contest, but does appear as though they're starting to find a little bit more in the backcourt as maybe they will get 2.5 assists per game out of Ruben Rodriguez, who's really not giving any sort of scoring whatsoever, but has been a pretty solid defensive stopper. He's been able to do a nice job just getting guys set up for some good open shots, and you've got a guy in TJ Weeks who, since he was a freshman over at UMass pre-COVID, has always been a good three-point shooter, shooting just 34% from the outside this year, but do think that should ascend. He's been able to give the team about 13 points, 5 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest as well, and they do go up against a Stony Brook team that has very much been having their warts with regards to their defense. For Stony Brook, 355th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and while this Rider team has been rough in terms of their offense, they're more around about 230th with regards to their defensive efficiency, going against the Stony Brook team that just has not really been able to find a lot with regards to their backcourt as well. I think both of these teams will struggle offensively, but Rider finds a way to be able to get the job done on the glass. Willing to lay up to 8 with Rider, semi-total 134.5, so here at the 135 plus, and on that total under to go along with Rider up to a -8. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. Youngstown St is playing against Toledo. Toledo does find themselves as 2 to 2.5 point underdogs. So it's between a 147.5 to a 148. Something's got to give with a pair of teams that seems like they have both fallen off the table from a season ago, but I'm willing to trust in Toledo. I'm willing to lay up to 1.5 with them for Toledo. Some less than savory results in their last 2 games against Division I teams, scoring combined 97 points against UC San Diego and Oakland. Prior to that, they had scored like 80-plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games. So, I mean, will the real Toledo please stand up? Because I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more online. This is not the same 3-point shooting team that they've been in past years, but they're still only turning the ball over about 8.5 times per contest. You've got a nice go-to scorer in Sonny Wilson, who's been able to supply the team with 16 points, 3.5 assists per game, and then Isaiah Adams is able to give you a little bit over 3 assists per game. Good versatility coming in from Buffalo. You don't have that main rebounder on this team, but you do have each of your top 4 scorers giving you at least 4 rebounds per game. Going against a Youngstown St team that I like Nico Galletti. He might actually be the best player out there on the floor. 6'6" combo player that comes on over from Stony Brook. He's been supplying the team with 13 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Love what he's able to bring to the table, but for Youngstown State, they don't necessarily have a lot of facilitation. You've got Jawan Maxey, who's been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game. Youngstown State shooting just 27.5% from 3-point range. Maxey and his 34.9% 3-point shooting actually leads the way for this unit, and that's not a good thing. E.J. Farmer, he's come in and he's been able to give the team 13.5 points per game after he, ironically enough, began his career over at Toledo, but he's not necessarily that top flight guy. You don't have as much size down low as you've had in past years as Chris Carroll. He's been able to give you about 4.5, 5 rebounds per game, but for Toledo, after they had a rough run of things against Oakland and San Diego, they played against a non-D1 team in Defiance that really got their confidence going once again, scoring 111 points in that one. I do think that Todd Kowalczyk going to be able to figure things out. I just think that the coaching in this one is going to be so big for Toledo. I think that they get back to that offense that we all know and love. Now, the defense, it has been rough once again, while outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but for Youngstown State, we have really seen it drop off with regards to their offense as well. And for their defense, they are a top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So did semi-total a little bit lower in this one. Semi-total at 145.5. I'm in on the under, but I think that Toledo gets it figured out. I do like them outright on the money line. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. Charlotte, it's the road they're facing off against Georgia State. Georgia State finds themselves as a very slight favorite of 1.5 to 2 points. So on this game, it is 142. Did semi-total at 145.5. I'm going to be in on the over. Charlotte still outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, but they're playing a bit more quickly than they did in past years. And then additionally, you've got a Georgia State team that they themselves have been just not necessarily so great at being able to put the ball in the basket, but they're looking to crank up a little bit more tempo as well. And then with the Georgia State team, they have been very much leaving a lot to be desired on defense. A big reason why I'm going to be taking a look at Charlotte outright on the money line for Georgia State in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're currently clocking in 305th in all of college basketball. They lose that go-to guy that was doing it all last year in Dwan Odom, and they're trying to replace him with Tariq Nutter, who's been very solid at 6'7", 18 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists per game. Not quite an amazing three-point shooter, though. Nicholas McMillan has been able to haul in for the team about 10 rebounds per game coming in from UNC Asheville, so he's been able to give the team a lot of second and third chances. But the versatility of John Carlos Rosado for the Charlotte team is amazing. He was really the understudy of Vladislav Golden over at Florida Atlantic last year, and he's been able to supply 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists. Not a guy that's going to pop it from three-point range or anything like that, but just whatever the team needs, he's able to supply for them. And then Nick Graves has become a really nice go-to scorer, being able to supply 16.5 points per game. It is a Charlotte team that they only shoot about 30% per three, but they're a top 20 team in terms of protecting the ball. They've been committing only about 8 turnovers per game. Robert Breisball, someone that's saying 6'7", that really doesn't haul in any rebounds whatsoever, has been able to shoot 47% from three. As a whole, they're only shooting about 30.5% from distance, but think that should be going upward moving forward. And then they do have plenty of size. You've got some like Dean Reiber, who he's only been able to give the team about 3 boards per contest, but someone that began his career at Rutgers, I think that he's got a little bit of upside. They've been dealing with Kylan Blackwell, dealing with a little bit of injury, but Kylan Blackman has been able to give you about 5.5 points per contest last year, was a double-figure scorer over at Coastal Carolina, so do think that there's a little bit of upside there. It is a Charlotte unit that has seen a bit of a drop-off in terms of their defense as well. They've given up 75-plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games, with the lone exception coming against a non-D1 school, so do think that you're going to be seeing an increase in scoring in this one, especially from a Charlotte team that has been pretty efficient with the ball. So I'm going to be willing to take this over. I'm setting my total at 145.5. And Charlotte, do think that they have just enough to be able to get the job done against a Georgia State team that just feels like things are a little bit, shall we say, discombobulated with them. The north of 13 turnovers per game is a big, giant concern. Outside of McMillan, along Tariq Nutter, you've been able to have a pair of guys in Tenori Lane along Cesar Edwards be able to step up, give the team a combined about 26, 27 points per game between the two of them, but outside of your main starting 5, you really have no depth whatsoever with this team, and I think that that's where Charlotte wins out in this one. So we'll take Charlotte on the money line, and I'm going to be in on the over. 6:15, 6:16 on the betting board. It is Western Kentucky playing us at Murray State. Murray State is a 3 to 3.5 point underdog. Total on this game, you're going to be finding it between a 147.5 to a 148. I'm going to be taking a shot on the over. I set my total 152.5. Western Kentucky last year played at warp speed. They were number 3 in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game, and you lose Steve Lutz, you hire on Hank Paloma, who was the assistant for the team, and they have not skipped a beat. They are number 4 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Western Kentucky, the team has been able to do a nice job of being able to hit the glass, with Babacar Faye being able to lead the way with 7.5 rebounds per game. Not a team that's necessarily going to light you up overly over the top from three-point range, but they are shooting his collective 36% from 3, with Faye shooting 45.5% from distance. I think that might regress a little bit, but Julius Redford, he's come in as a freshman, and he has been a tremendous contributor. 12 points on nearly 47.5% three-point shooting, and even though you don't necessarily have that one main facilitator, you've got a lot of guys that are very unselfish in being able to dole out the ball. You've got a nice glue guy in Jalen Jackson, who really doesn't contribute a lot to scoring, but gives out 2.5 assists, does a good job being able to generate a steal or two, play some rock-solid defense for a Western Kentucky team that in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, they have been a top 125 team, and despite how quickly they play, 65 points or fewer allowed in 3 out of their last 5 games, one of those exceptions being against Kentucky, and you've got a Murray State team that they themselves have been pretty locked down with regards to their defense. They have been a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis as well, but Jacoby Wood, he's really going to be an X-factor for this offense because he's able to give out 5.5 assists per game, 14 points per contest. He needs to tame down the 3.3 turnovers per game. It is a Murray State team, though, that is shooting north of 40% from three-point range as collective. Again, I think that you're going to see a little bit of a drop-off here, but typically they're used to playing a little bit more slow and controlled. I think that Western Kentucky is going to get this team to speed up a little bit more. A.J. Ferguson, Kyler Milton, they've been able to combine for 23 points and around about 3 assists per game in that backcourt, and Terrence Harcum, really like what he's able to supply with 13 points per contest of his own as well, but you don't necessarily have that one main guy that's able to hit the glass for the team. Kyron Lindsey, he comes on over after he was the top rebounder over at Georgia prior to him transferring out a few seasons ago. He's been more of a shot blocker for this team. 2 blocks, a steal, 9 points, 6 rebounds per game, so relatively good stat sheet suffered, but was expecting a little bit more out of Alden Applewhite. I do think that Western Kentucky, with Don McHenry being a do-it-all guy that's able to give you right around about 14 to 15 points per game, it's going to be just enough to be able to get the job done. I do think that Western Kentucky going to get this game playing a little bit more up and down. So did sell by total 152.5. I'm in on the over. and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with Western Kentucky. 6-17, 6-18 on the betting board. It is Florida Atlantic, and they play host to Texas State. Texas State is Texas 2 step into being an 8.5-point underdog. Total on this game between 148.5 to 149. I do like the points here with Texas State. I did set them as an underdog of 6 points. For Atlantic, certainly has left something to be desired defensively. And for Florida Atlantic, even though they play quickly, it's not like they're the most efficient offense in the world because they are turning the ball over darn near 14 times per game. They've got a lot of guys in the backcourt that are able to supply some nice offense. Lowell Walker, Caleb Glenn. These two guys are combined for about 25.5 points per game. Walker has been your main facilitator with about 5 assists per game. Team as a whole is shooting 37% from 3-point range, but again, those 12.5 to 13 turnovers per game, that's been a little bit costly. Kai Tandy has been taking on a little bit of a lesser role along with Cat Evans Jr. They both come over after being top scorers at their respective schools. Both of these guys give between about 8.5 to 10 points per contest. Evans has been able to give you 3 assists per game as a little bit of an ancillary facilitator, but for Texas State, like what Caden Gums brings to the table, 14 points, 4 assists, 3.5 boards, shooting 38.5% from 3-point range. And Texas State has really been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and being able to guard the 3-point arc is going to be very big in this one as well. Florida Atlantic right now clocking in 162nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Texas State traditionally is a team that likes to slow it down a little bit more. They've been playing a touch faster this season, and for Texas State, they're more around about 129th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that that's going to be very big for them, and as I was alluding to with regards to that 3-point shooting defense, Florida Atlantic 352nd in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Doesn't take much to beat that. In Texas State, they're more around 227. So I do think that there's going to be wide open looks from 3. I did set my total at 152, so going to be in on the over. But additionally, with this Texas State team, having Tyrell Morgan along with Tyler Pope being able to combine for 13 rebounds per game, that's big. And Josh O'Gara has just been really versatile for this bunch. A little bit over a seal, 6.5 boards, 10 points per game. Like what I'm seeing there. It is a FAU team that also has Bobby Miller down low. Comes in from Florida State. He's able to supply the team with 7.5 rebounds per game. But outside of him, don't necessarily get a ton of rebounding. And then with this Florida Atlantic team, they've been able to get to at least 78 points in each of their last 3 games. Other than their games against Seton Hall and Drake, they've been really playing at warp speed. Meanwhile, you've got a Texas State team that's right now riding a 5-game win streak. They've been able to get to 74 plus against the likes of Rice, Ohio, Princeton. So to think that this is going to be an up and down game, we'll take the points with Texas State. Set my total 152. So also in on the over. 6-19, 6-20 on the betting board. Neutral court game between Tulsa and Central Florida. And Central Florida is finding themselves as 11 to 12 point favorites. This game is anywhere between 145 to 146. This is a technically neutral court game, but it's happening out there at Sunrise, Florida. It's at the Amerant Bank Arena, and that said, with the Central Florida team, pretty much a home game for them, but going to set them at an 11.5. You're at 11 or less, I'd be willing to lay 12 or more, willing to take the points with Tulsa, and personally, because we're between 11 and 12, I'd rather take 12 rather than lay 11. With Central Florida, it does feel like it's a little bit more disjointed down low for the team than it was a season ago. Last year, you had guys like Abrima Diallo and company doing a rock-solid job. This year, you've had Keyshawn Hall be able to supply the team with 7 boards, 14.5 points per game, but other than him, you just don't have a lot down low. You've got Mustafa Thiam, who's come in as a freshman. He's been able to give you 5 rebounds per game. Was he with a little bit of an injury / perhaps it was a suspension that he was out for a game or so. He missed one of those games against UW Milwaukee, but has returned ever since then. A combined 9 blocks and 16 rebounds in the last 2 games. That's been relatively impressive. Tulsa's going to have a tough time matching up with that with Carlos Williams out from a season ago. It's been really a slog for them to find anything, as you've had Braden Carrington be able to give the team right around about 5 rebounds per game. But you do have relatively good versatility with Juwan Odom. He was the top scorer over at Georgia State last year, and he's been able to supply the team with about 12.5 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, steal and a half per contest, so helping out a wide variety of ways. And then off the ball, Keston Willis, he's been able to supply the team with 14 points. Has always been a high 3-point shooter. He's been able to give you about 40% 3-point shooting this year, and for Tulsa, they're shooting just 29.5% from distance as a collective. Should be going a little bit northward. Now, I do like the Central Florida backcourt and what you've been able to get out of the duo of Darius Johnson, Lon Jordan, Ivy Curry. Both guys hovering right around about 16 points per game, with Johnson being just a do-it-all guy. He's 3 steals per game in the top 5 in all of college basketball, 5 assists per game, shooting currently 47% from 3-point range as well. But when it comes to the Central Florida team, they do leave themselves a little bit vulnerable down low to giving up a lot of second and third chances. And with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, they're about 196th in all of college basketball. This is a Tulsa unit that they themselves have been able to do a relatively solid job being able to guard the arc as well. With this being a bit of a neutral court game, I do think that that's going to bog down the scoring just a little bit from the outside. So I did set my total at 145.5, or between about a 145 to a 146. Personally, I would rather take the 146 under rather rather than the 145 over, but that said, at 12 plus, also going to be willing to take the points with Tulsa. Do think that they're doing for a little bit of positivity and would like to see a little bit more of the likes of Benny Williams and company for Central Florida. So at 12 plus, we'll take those points with Tulsa to go along with a 146 or higher under. 621, 622 on the betting board, Cincinnati, and yes, we are on to Cincinnati. They play us Xavier. Xavier is a 7.5 point underdog with a total of 144.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Cincinnati. Set them as a 9-point favorite. Now, the one thing that you have to have caution with Cincinnati is that they've got great metrics. They're in the top 40 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been doing an amazing job on the glass. They played one of the weaker schedules in all of college basketball. When they did play against a real opponent like Villanova, they did get a bit exposed about a week or so ago, but I do love the game of Simeus Lucasius. Guy stands right around about 6'6", 6'7", 16 points, 3.5 assists, shooting north of 50% from three. That'll be going downward just a little bit, but Cincinnati has been running some really nice, clean offense with only about 9.5 turnovers per game. Dylan Mitchell has been able to slide the team with 7 boards, 12 points per contest, and now they're finally getting back Dan Skillings as well. Dan Skillings has missed all but 2 games thus far this season. Last year was one of their top guys with 13 points, 6.5 boards. Not going to light you up from three-point range or anything like that, but he should be able to help out against the Xavier team that does have quite a bit of size and versatility with Zach Fremantle back from a season ago, missing all of last year, 2 years ago, was a nice 15-plus point per game score, picking up right where he left off, 17 points, 8 boards. Not shooting it quite the same as the north of 55% from three that he had 2 seasons ago, but overall Xavier is shooting 40% from the outside, and this is a very good offense that they hit a little bit of a rut when they went up against Michigan a few weeks ago, but Davion McKnight does it all for this bunch, 4.5 assists, 11 points per game. It's been a little bit of a top-heavy team. Would like to see a little bit more of likes of John Hughley, Trey Green, guys like this, but they've had Ryan Conwell, the transfer from Indiana State, really be able to step up. 16.5 points shooting north of 45% from three-point range. For Xavier, though, this is a team that I do think that they're going to be giving quite a bit on the defensive side of things, especially along the perimeter as well. This is a team that does a pretty rock-solid job down low, but currently 301st in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Makes it very tricky with this total. As Xavier, back 2 years ago when they had Fremantle and company, they were looking to run quite a bit more. Saw a big dip in offensive production when he was off the floor. Now that he's back, we are starting to see them be able to pick it up just a little bit more. So I did set my total more at a 145. So you're at the 144.5. It's my max buy point on the over, but I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over. But do like with Cincinnati, all the overall versatility that you're able to get for this team. And it's a Xavier team that they've been okay at generating turnovers. I think that Cincinnati keeps it clean here, though. Willing to lay up to 8.5 with Cincinnati, and I'm going to be in on the over. 623, 624 on the betting board. From lovely Henderson, Nevada, it's Santa Clara playing against Bradley. Bradley is a 2-point underdog with a total between 145 to 146, and with Bradley, I did set them as a underdog of 1.5 points. At the 2, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, the caution that I have with Bradley is right now they are shooting as a collective north of 44% from three-point range. That is not going to be long-lasting for the entirety of the season. No team closed with a three-point shooting percentage above 41% last season, but have to love what you're seeing on these guys in the backcourt. Duke Dean has been able to give you north of 4 assists, 14 points per contest. You've got guys that are able to do a nice job of being able to hit the glass as well, like Darius Hannah has been able to come in with Hannah, 13 points, 6 boards, 2 steals. He's shooting 47% from three-point range. You've been able to get right around about 6 points, 5 boards per contest out of Ahmet Janovic, who stands 7'1", not necessarily a guy that's going to be stretching the floor or anything like that, but he does a good job for Bradley to be able to really maintain down low against a Santa Clara team that has all sorts of size. They were one of your top rebound rate teams in all of college basketball last season, but has been quite that this year. Johnny O'Neal's giving you 5.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. You've had Christoph Tilly, a true 7-footer, only give you about 4 boards per contest, less than a block per game as well. And the offense has just been very much a whole is greater than some of its parts approach. I like what Tyree Bryan is able to bring to the table, 9 points per contest, currently shooting 45% from three-point range, and it's been very surprising what we've seen out of Elijah Mahai, who's been able to give you 12 points, 4.5 boards, right now shooting 47.5% from three-point range at Alma Ball. He's back from a season ago. He's giving you 12 points per game, but feels like Carlos Stewart is starting to pick up where he was a few seasons ago with Santa Clara. He had a little bit of a rough go of it to begin the season. Overall, he's averaging about 11.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, but he's been able to put up 13-plus points in each out of the last 4 games, double figures in each out of the last 5, so he's been able to do a nice job there. It is a Santa Clara team, though, that is turning the ball over about 13 times per game. Bradley has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Bradley is a pretty good imposing defense. They've given up 70 points or fewer for their last 5 games. With Santa Clara, it's just been touch and go for them. One night they look amazing, the next night they look absolutely awful, but they've been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their defense as well. This is going to be a neutral court game, and this is a Bradley team that They have been quite efficient with regards to their offense. This is a Santa Clara team that they themselves have been as well. So it's a situation of something's got to give. I do think that both of these teams are going to be approaching 73, 74 or so points. So I did set my total 147.5. I'm in on the over. Having been out there to Lee's Family Forum, it's a very nice shooting environment as well. So I do like the over, and I'm going to be willing to take 2+ here with Bradley. 625, 626 on the betting board from Gainbridge Fieldhouse. It is Wisconsin facing off against Butler. Butler does find themselves as 5 to 5.5 point underdogs. Totals between 145.5 to a 146. So Wisconsin has a 4-point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Butler. This is happening out there in the great state of Indiana. So I had to give them a little bit of credence there. And for Wisconsin, this has been a team that's been able to do the little things well. Top 25 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. If they're not number one, they're in the top 5 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage, as well as John Tonje has been your main scorer with north of 20 points per contest. But with this Wisconsin team as well, we do see that they do give up the arc a little bit too much. They've been having a little bit of a rough go of it on the defensive side of things, and they go up against a Butler unit that is one of your better three-point shooting teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. They bring back their top 2 scorers from a season ago, Jamal Telford along with Pierre Brooks. These two guys have been able to pick up right where they were a season ago, combining for just under 32 points per contest. Both of these guys combined shoot about 42% for three-point range. And then Patrick McCaffrey with 6'9" size, 46% three-point shooter, 12.5 points per game. Now, after that, you do see a big giant drop-off as Philip Bizjack. He's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. Has been able to keep things relatively clean for Butler, but overall they are turning the ball over about 13 times per game. Andre Screen is able to give you 6 rebounds per game. I think that he matches up okay with the likes of Nolan Winter and company down low. You've been able to have some good versatility as Stephen Kroll over the years as well. At 7 feet tall, he's able to give you multiple assists. He's been able to do a nice job supplying for the team right around about 10 points per contest as well, but it's all about which team can guard the three-point line a little bit better. And Butler, they're right now allowing opponents to shoot about 31% from three-point range. For Wisconsin, while they do allow opponents to shoot just 29.5% from distance, last year that was 37% from the outside. I can't help but feel like they've been getting some good, shall we say, three-point shooting variants to go their way. And this Wisconsin defense has been getting exposed a little bit more, giving up 74-plus points in 3 of their last 5 games. It is a Butler team that they have been all over the place with regards to their offenses. In the last 5 games, they scored 71 against Northwestern, 87 against Mississippi State, 73 against Eastern Illinois, 51 against Houston, 68 against North Dakota State. Like, just a wide gamut of results for them, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this game. I do think that you're going to get enough out of Andre Screen to be able to hold up down low against a Wisconsin team that also has John Blackwell has been able to provide the team with double figures. Both of these teams aren't necessarily playing super up-tempo, but both of these teams have been pretty efficient with their offense. Both of these teams, I think, are going to have their difficulties on defense as well. So I did set my total 148 in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the 5+ here with Butler. 627, 628 on the betting board. It is Georgetown, and they are on the road against Syracuse. Syracuse a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Totals between 152 to 152.5. I did make Syracuse a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the deuce with them. Life has not been fun for Syracuse without J.J. Starling, and he's going to be out the full once again for this team, but I still think that they're going to be able to do a solid job down low, and that's what they're going to need to do to be able to win this game, because Thomas Sorber has really been nice for the Georgetown team. He's been able to supply the team with 15+ points per contest. He's hauling in there north of 6 rebounds per game, and has really been able to do a good job for a Georgetown team that last year they were well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Have been able to climb into the top 125 this season, and for Georgetown, they're doing a relatively solid job down low, but leaving a little bit to be desired from the outside. They're about 240th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I do think that Donnie Freeman going to be able to hold up down low for Syracuse as well. He has been rock solid with 14 points, 8.5 boards. Give it a little bit of versatility with Syracuse. We should see a little bit of positivity with their 27.5% three-point shooting, and it just feels like they're finding their bearings in terms of the facilitation with this team, as Yaquan Carlos is now giving out 4.5 assists per game. Not really going to give you a lot in terms of scoring. And then you've got Mr. Do-It-All and Jair Davis right around about 11 points, 5.5 boards. Should see the 14.5% three-point shooting going northward, though he's never been an amazing three-point shooter. But Eddie Lampkin giving you 3 assists, 7 boards, 9 points per game. He should be able to allow this team to be able to win that battle down low. And then for Georgetown, Micah Petey, who's been able to come over from TCU, give the team double figures with 13.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals. He has been incredible for this bunch, but they shoot just 29% from three-point range as well, doing a relatively solid job keeping things semi-clean with the ball, about 12 turnovers per contest, but with Malik Mack, feels like there's just been a learning curve with him coming up from Harvard, being able to give the team 4 assists, 12.5 points per game, and we saw Georgetown in that game against West Virginia. It just felt like rubber really met the road in terms of having a road game. They were in control of that game early, and then you saw Mack commit too many fouls. He was committing a few turnovers in that game, really just cratered in the back half of the game, and they've been dealing with a few injuries of their own as well. So I do think that for Georgetown, the backcourt, shall we say, inexperience is really going to be hurting them a little bit. With Syracuse, I think that they match up relatively well down low, and I do think that Syracuse, despite the fact that Starlin still had the full for the team, probably won't return until conference play, finds a way to be able to get it done on their home floor. I did set my line at a 2.5, so I'm willing to lay up to 2 with Syracuse, and I do think that this is a lower scoring game, as both of these teams have struggled from three-point range, and you've really seen this Georgetown team play some better defense. So I'm in on the under, set my total more around a 146.5, and I'm willing to lay up to 2 with Syracuse. 629, 630 on the betting board. It is Kansas. They play host NC State, and NC State does find themselves as 14 to 14.5 point underdogs. So on this game between 144.5 to 146, and with Kansas, set them as 15.5 point favorites. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 14 or so with NC State. This is just not the same team that we've seen in past seasons, as they have not been able to get a lot from three-point range or shooting less than 32.5% as a collective. Now they're going to have to match up with a guy down low, and Hunter Dickinson, who has been absolutely tremendous for Kansas. 15 points, 9.5 boards, a block, a steal per contest. He's able to pop it from three-point range. And then additionally, DeJuan Harris, just one of the more, shall we say, stable guys in the backcourt in all of college basketball. He gives out 6 assists, less than 1.5 turnovers per game. Not a guy that's really going to light you up from three-point range, but A.J. Storr has seen his three-point shooting percentage go up to 36%. I feel like he's been quite a bit more efficient this year than he was even last year with Wisconsin, where he was, for lack of a better term, just a little bit of a chucker. And the versatility of Zeke Mayo, so big for this team as well. He just gives you whatever the game requires. 3.5 assists, 4 boards, 11 points per game. Not a guy that really dominates in one facet of basketball, but he's able to do a lot of things well. And then KJ Adams. Are they going to be able to unlock him? Because in that game against Furman a few days ago, he was able to give the team 22 points. It's been a little bit touch and go for him throughout the season, but feels like he's starting to find his bearings as well. Do you think that Kansas, after they lose that game to Missouri and they also lose to Creighton as well, they're going to be a little bit cheesed off coming into this one against an NC State team that has Marcus Hill that's giving you 13 points per game? Again, three-point shooting isn't really there. NC State, much like last year, they're doing a good job taking care of the ball with about 10 turnovers per game, and they've slowed down their tempo quite a bit as well. This team is well outside the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game, but for NC State, I just fear that they're a little bit of a paper tiger in terms of their numbers right now, because if you take a look at NC State and their three-point shooting defense, they're allowing opponents to shoot just 25% from three-point range at home, 35.7% on the road. They're 15th overall because they have played many more games at home rather than on the road, and they've been facing off against, let's call it what it is, some outmatched competition when they've been at home. And then you've got Ben Middlebrooks, Brandon Huntley, Hatfield, who will be able to combine for 10 rebounds per game. I just don't think that they're going to be able to hold up down low against this bunch. Michael O'Connell, very efficient with the ball, but you need him to be a little bit more of an assertive scorer. He's only been able to give the team about 7 points per contest, and this is a Kansas team that they themselves have been a little bit leaky with their defense, giving up 72-plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games. So it's an interesting scenario here. I did set my total at a 143.5 with the way that NC State has been slowing things down quite a bit, and for this NC State team, just really not getting a lot from the outside. In regulation, they have failed to get past 70 points in each of the last 5 games, so I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Kansas. 631, 632 on the betting board. Arizona is going to be playing against UCLA. This is from the state of Arizona at the Footprint Center, and right now, Arizona is a 3 to a 4-point favorite. It's between 147 to 147.5. I'll be writing this game up. I like UCLA to be able to get the job done. I set them as a 2-point favorite for Arizona. Still do very much have question marks with them in step-up games, because Arizona has played against a lot of outmatched competition and has been able to really pad their numbers there. Now they have to face off against a true defense in UCLA that is in the top 10 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, number 1 in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, and Tyler Bilodeau, he has been really able to produce for this team in so many different ways. 13.5 points, 5 boards. He's able to shoot 38.5% from three-point range against an Arizona unit that, I mean, Caleb Love is giving you 14 points. He's looked a little bit better recently, but we've seen some less than savory moments out of him for Arizona. They play super up-tempo. They're once again back in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and I like what I'm seeing out of Toby Awaka. He's been able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game. And the team overall, they do a solid job on the glass. Trey Townsend, double-figure amount of points, 4.5 rebounds per game. KJ Lewis has be able to give you about 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 10.5 points per game. He's able to come into his own, but for this Arizona team, you do have to always have the fear about this defense as well, which right now it looks pretty solid on paper. But again, when you're going against Old Dominion, when you're going up against these outgunned teams like Canisius, it's very easy to look rock solid with that regard. It's an Arizona team that right now is about, despite that, 278th in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And then with having guys like a Kobe Johnson, who has so much versatility for UCLA, he's been able to give you about 8 or so points per contest, but does a nice job giving you 5 boards, 3 assists per contest. You've had Eric Daly, the Daily Show, give you 12.5 points, 5 rebounds. It's just a really well put together UCLA team that's doing the little things right. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per game. They're looking to slow this game down. Arizona's going to be looking to speed it up. I do think the UCLA is going to be able to play relatively slow, relatively controlled, get exactly what they want in this game against an Arizona team that, even though the offense has been very high-powered, scoring 76 plus points in each of their last 4 games, we've seen them be slowed down by a team like Duke, scoring just 55 points in that one. I do think that UCLA is going to get Arizona out of their sort of source. And I think that they win this game outright on the money line, despite the fact that it is going to be from the great state of Arizona. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take UCLA outright on the money line. I'll be writing up the spread for this game, and I did set my total at 146. So I'm in on the under, and I'm in on UCLA on the money line. 633, 634 on the betting board. It's Eaton Hall, and they're going to be on the road against Rutgers. Rutgers, a 12.5 to a 13-point favorite. And your total on this game, it is between 133 to 133.5. I feel like we've gone a little bit too far on this one. I set Rutgers as a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the 12 plus here with Seton Hall. With Seton Hall, I recognize that this has not been a great season for them, but the defense is still holding up. They're still a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're also a staggering 320th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I think that they're going to hold up in this game against a Rutgers team that obviously has your 2 amazing freshmen. And personally, I love what I'm seeing out of Ace Bailey, but Dylan Harper has been the star for me. 23.5 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists per game. Just a very complete player. While Bailey has been able to give you 17.5 points per game, but nobody outside of that is giving you north of 8.5 points per game. You've got Lathan Somerville, who's been able to give you 4 boards per contest, and Jordan Durcock, he just does what the game requires. 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists. A really nice glue guy that comes on over from Merrimack. But with Rutgers, we have seen with their rise in offense and these 2-star freshmen, the defense really cratered. Typically under Steve Peichel, this is one of the best defenses in all of college basketball. They entered in Friday, 151st in all of college basketball. Turns points allowed on a per possession basis. Then you've got Chauncey Jenkins, who's been able to supply the team with 4.5 boards, 11.5 points per game, shooting 42.5% from 3. And for as bad as Seton Hall has been with regards to their offense, they are shooting as collective about 36.5% from 3-point range. And with Rutgers losing Cliff Amory, this just is not the same team on the glass. Not to say that there's some sort of a terrible team with regards to rebounding, but I do think that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach with Seton Hall, with guys like a Yasan Toomey being able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Going to be able to hold up in this one. Right now for Seton Hall, they're in the top 100 with regards to their rebound rate. Rutgers, they're more around about 177th. I think that this is going to be a slowed down slog of a game, and I do think that Seton Hall finds a way to be able to stay within the number. I did set my number at a 130.5 with regards to the total. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be writing up the points with Seton Hall. 635, 636 on the betting board. Western Illinois, it's the road they're facing off against South Dakota. South Dakota does find themselves as 8.5 point favorites. Total on this game is 154.5 to a 155, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. I did set my total more around a 152, 152.5, because with Western Illinois, this team has been able to do a good job with regards to their defensive prowess, and it's got what it is. This Western Illinois team over the last few seasons has been one of the lesser teams on offense in all of college basketball. And for South Dakota, last year they were a team that was shooting north of 36.5% from 3-point range. They've seen that fall off to the low 30s from 3-point range this season as well. So even though they're playing super up-tempo, they're a top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. That is a little bit of a concern. South Dakota, they are allowing opponents to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range at home. So that is something that's going to be helping out this total a little bit more, and that helps Western Illinois be able to hang in this game. I do think that you've got a little bit of value there. I set my line at 8, so here at the 8.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Western Illinois. It's been a lot of, shall we say, moving parts with them. Jonathan Cisse last year, he was their top rebounder, giving them 11 plus rebounds per game. Him being out of the fold meant that you had a little bit of shuffling down low, but you've been able to have Marco Melitic step in, be able to give team 15.5 plus points per contest, and Tay Knox has been able to do a nice job supplying this team with 7.5 rebounds per game. They have to deal with a little bit of an ailment to Ryan Myers. He has missed each of the last 2 games for this unit. We have not seen him here in the month of December. I don't think that we're going to be seeing him here. Also, a big reason why I do like this total under as well, because this is a Western Illinois team that overall they're shooting 35% from 3. Last year shot 40% from the outside. So It's meant that they have needed to play a little bit more through the interior, but Sean Smith has stepped up in a big way. 11.5 points, 6 boards, 5.5 assists. He's been able to be sort of that do-it-all sort of player for this team. I think you got Bruns squared with Isaac Bruns along with Paul Bruns for South Dakota, being able to supply the team with a combined about 23 or so points per contest. It has been a forte, and Chase Forte, who's been the main guy for this team, though. 3.5 assists, 2 steals, 15 points per game for a team that, again, they turn the ball over only about 10.5 times per game, so even though they play up tempo, they do a nice job protecting it there, but they don't necessarily shoot it well from three, and they're just unable to generate a lot of second chances other than Cameron Fentz, who's been able to give you 5 rebounds per game as a true 7-footer. You don't have a ton down low for this team. You've got Paul Bruns, one of the Bruns brothers who I mentioned, giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game, and Ashton Smith has been able to chip in there about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. He's a guy that has transferred all around the universe, starting at Oral Roberts and Texas A&M, but I do think that this game gets slowed down a little bit with Western Illinois. Deal with some ailments of the backcourt, but I do think that their defense is going to be just enough to be able to hold in this game, as they have actually given up Western Illinois at 64 points or fewer for their last 5 games. Is a South Dakota team that they themselves have given up 80-plus points in each of their last 4, so something's got to give. I do think that this game gets cranked a little bit more low tempo, and that helps out Western Illinois in terms of hanging within the spread. So at 8.5 plus, we'll take those points with Western Illinois and in on the under. 637, 638 on the betting board. Louisiana Monroe is on the road against UT Arlington. UT Arlington is a 12.5 to a 13-point favorite, and your total on this game between 151.5 to a 152, and with UT Arlington, make them an 11.5 point favorite. Here at the 12 plus, we're going to be willing to take those points with UT Arlington. They've been playing with their hair on fire. They're a top 35 team in terms of total possessions per game, but they're just not doing a great job of being able to take care of the ball. They are turning the ball over north of 13 times per game, and for Louisiana Monroe, it's been less than savory for them. They're outside the top 250 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that they're going to be able to do enough down low to be able to hold in this game. Now, it's a big X factor that Lance Ware is back for this UT Arlington team. He's a former top 75 recruit of Kentucky. He spent a little bit of time at Villanova as well, and since he's been able to return, as he missed the first 4 or 5 games of the season for UT Arlington, has really been able to make a nice difference. 14 points, 7 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest for a team that's currently shooting 40% from 3-point range. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there, especially when you consider that they're shooting north of 44% from 3-point range when they're on the road, and about 28% from 3-point range at home. That home 3-point shooting percentage should go up. That road 3-point shooting percentage should go down. They are at home in this one, so I think that you get somewhere in between A and B, somewhere in the mid-30s, but you've had Jalen Bolden for this Louisiana Monroe team be able to supply the team with 5.5 boards, 12 points per game. Love what he's been able to do. And then you've got a lot of other guys like Jerry Ngogpod, who's been able to give you 5 rebounds per game, but Kai Willis has stepped up as a 6'8", little bit of a combo player that's been able to give you a little bit in terms of 3-point shooting. He's been able to supply the team with 9 points, 5.5 boards, 7.5 per contest, like what I've been seeing there. Louisiana Monroe having a tough time taking care of the ball themselves, about 13.5 turnovers per game, but you've got Therese Watson, who's been able to give you 2 steals per game as well. Louisiana Monroe has done a nice job of, just for lack of a better term, making their games incredibly sloppy. It's been a unit that has scored 60 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, so an exception against a Pine Bluff team that's in the bottom 5 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And we've seen this UT Arlington team get slowed down by the likes of Murray State, by the likes of an Austin Peay. So I do think that Louisiana Monroe going to get a little bit more of their slow grinder style to be able to hold in this game. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Monroe. Made them an 11.5 point dog and did set my total 149.5. So in on the under and in on the points with Monroe. 639, 640 on the betting board. This is also from State Farm Arena. Arizona State is going to be playing against Florida. Florida is a 9 to a 9.5 point favorite, and your total is between 153.5 to a 154. And South Florida is a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Florida. This has been a much improved defense from a season ago. I think it was 6 out of their last 7 games last year. They had given up 80 plus points. They were outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It had really hit the skids for them, and you do have an Arizona State team that in the past few seasons, it's been rough for them on offense, and they've been really able to see a nice surge in terms of their overall 3-point shooting percentage. This year, they went to the mid-major ranks, and all these pieces are right now matching. You've got a guy in B.J. Freeman who comes over from UW-Milwaukee, just does a bit of everything, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, 12 points per game. Not necessarily stroking it really well from 3-point range, but you've been able to have Bashir Jihad give you 13 points, shooting 35% for 3 at 6'9", and Josan Sanan. He has been an under-the-radar freshman that has supplied the team with 16 points per game, shooting north of 50% 38% from three, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off with that. And Sinan, to his credit, he's been relatively consistent. He's given the team 18-plus points in each of the last 5 games, and this is a unit that I think is going to be able to do a better job than most down low against Florida, because with Florida, you don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to give you 8-plus rebounds per game, but you've got Thomas Hall, who's able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per contest. You've got a lot of guys that they're able to just mix and match there, while Jarence Quitanis, he's come over from the state of North Carolina. He's only giving you about 8 points per game, but he's also hauling in there 8 boards per contest, but you've only got one of him. Meanwhile, along with what you're able to get out of Thomas Hall, you've got Alex Condon, who's able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game. Even these guards do a nice job of getting physical and being able to hit the boards as well. Elijah Martin, 15 points, 6 boards, 2 steals. He's been able to stroke it at 35% from three-point range, and it's a Florida team that it's not even like they're an amazing three-point shooting team. They're shooting 33.5% from distance, but they're an up-tempo team that turns the ball over just 10 times per contest. Urban Klavsar got a little bit of a late start to the season. I think that he's got a bit of upside in this backcourt. Sam Alexis is able to give you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. And then the main glue guy down low is Ruben Chenalu, who's been able to come in from Nigeria, 5.5 points, 6.5 boards, a little bit over a block per game. It has really fortified this Florida team with regards to their defense. Arizona State starting to play a little bit more up-tempo, but because this is a little bit more of a neutral court game, I do think that the three-point shooting is going to be a little bit more sporadic for Arizona State. I think that Florida wins that battle down low. So I did set Florida as a 10.5 point favorite. Wanted to lay the 9 here, and I'm in on the total under. I set my total at a 152.5. 641, 642 on the betting board. Utah State is going to be playing us to South Florida. South Florida is a 15.5 to a 16-point dog. Total on this game is 154. I'm going to be willing to take the points with South Florida. I did set them as more of a 14.5 point underdog with Utah State. This has been a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got your 2 main guys that returned from a season ago, and Mason Falsloff along with Ian Martinez, really firing all cylinders. Like, these are 2 guys that have been able to combine for about 34.5 points per game, with Falsloff a little bit better down low. 6 boards, 2 steals, 2.5 assists per contest, shooting 46.5% for 3, while Martinez gives you a little bit more facilitation, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shooting 43% from 3-point range, but both have been tremendous. And then Uba Gasterse, who comes on over from the Atlantic Sun, shooting 76% from the floor, 8.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. But I do think that with South Florida, you get just enough out of this backcourt to hold in there. Jaden Reed is someone that I like, giving you about 14 points, 4 assists per game. We've seen a bit of a fall off in terms of his overall efficiency. He was shooting very well from 3-point range a season ago. This year, he's shooting 41.5% from 3, but that has come with 3.3 turnovers per game. But Jemiah Reynolds is a nice low post presence that is able to give the team about 8.5 or so rebounds per game. For South Florida, it's very imperative that they guard the arc a little bit better, because they're about to earn 6th in all of college basketball with this regard. Meanwhile, you've got a Utah State team that's right around there as well. Both of these teams allow their opponent to shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range, because Sean Jennings has been able to flow some nice offense, 2.5 assists, 10.5 points per game. Currently shooting 48% from 3-point range. And for South Florida as a whole, they do shoot about 32.5, 33% from 3-point range. Brendan Stroud is able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. Dante Green has been able to do the same as well. For South Florida, they've went through a lot this year with the passing of their coach just weeks before the start of the season. Feels like they're starting to find their bearings. They've been able to lock down a little bit more on defense, 74 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Certainly has been a little bit less than savory there, and that's a part of the reason why I did set a higher total in this one. I did set my total at a 154.5, so here at the 154, it's a maximum to take the over on, but I'm going to be willing to take the over. But I do think that South Florida does just enough, even with a tough road trip, to hold in there. I'm going to be willing to take the points and the over. 643, 644 on the betting board. This is from Mississippi Coast Coliseum, a neutral court game between Southern Miss and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 20.5 point favorite. It's on this game between 148.5 to 149. Had Andre Curbelo not been suspended for this game, I'd probably be taking a look at the over, because with Southern Miss, their tempo is very much based on whether or not Andre Curbelo is out there on the floor or not. When Andre Curbelo is out there, there's no defense that is played whatsoever, but you get a relatively good offensive effort from Southern Miss. For Southern Miss, the defense really improves when Andre Curbelo is not out there on the floor, but you get absolutely no offense whatsoever. So, my total of 146.5, I'm going to be diving in on the under. For Andre Curbelo, he's currently suspended indefinitely, and he's only played in 4 games as far as the season, but with Denna J. Harris, he's been able to do a rock-solid job for the Southern Miss team. He's been able to supply the team with 14 points, 9 boards per contest. The problem is there's only one of him, and for Ole Miss, they should still be able to control this game down low. You've been able to get relatively good efforts out of Dre Davis along with Jamin Brakefield, combining for about 23 points per contest. Not that these guys have been amazing from 3, but Ole Miss is running just such good, clean offense. I'm willing to lay up to 20 with them. And with this Ole Miss team, they actually opened up as a 19-point favorite. I'm still seeing some 20s. Would be willing to lay that. For Ole Miss, it has been a little bit hit or miss with regards to the 3-point shooting this year. year, but in games played away from home, they're actually shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and this is technically a game played away from home with just 8 turnovers per game. They've been very crisp and clean with regards to their offense, 20th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But again, if you want to take a look at games just strictly played away from home, only Iowa State is averaging more points per possession, and Sean Padula has come in from Virginia Tech, and he's been great. 14 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting 44% from three-point range. Malik Diaz has been able to give you some good contributions, and as a matter of fact, if you count in there guys that have missed a game or two like Matthew Morrell, Dre Davis, you've got pretty much 8 different guys that are giving you north of 6.5 points per game, and you just don't have that with the Southern Miss unit. If you've got Natalie Alvarez, who's been able to float some nice clean offense, 3.5 assists per game, though, and as a Southern Miss team that they themselves are turning the ball over north of 15 times per contest. Andre Cabello being in and out of the fold has not helped out that, but D'Antoni Gordon, a typical double-figure scorer over at Little Rock, has only been able to give the team about 9 points per game. You do have Christian Watson in the backcourt along with Alvarez, combining for about 21.5 points per game, but neither of these guys shoot it well from three-point range as well. Do you think that Ole Miss going to be able to take it to the Southern Miss unit, as we've seen this Ole Miss defense, other than the games against Purdue and BYU, really be able to step up? They allowed Louisville to score just 63 points in their road win over them. Lindenwood, they just pounded into oblivion as well. And for Southern Miss, it's just out of sorts for them right now. And again, when Andre Cabello's out of the fold, they just played a much lower tempo. So did so by total 146.5. I'm in on this total under, and at 20 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with Ole Miss. 645, 646 on the betting board. It is Marshall, and they play also Ohio. Ohio does find themselves as 1 to 1.5 point favorites, and your total on this game is between 156.5 to 157. And with Ohio, set them as 2.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5. With Marshall, they've got a bit of an edge down low, as I like what I've been seeing out of Nate Martin, who's been able to give you 9 plus boards, 14 plus points per game, and Obiana Onchile Killian. So remember, a few seasons ago in non-conference play, he was like a top 5 shot blocker in all of college basketball, and said he has been not really able to give you a lot from the outside as he tries to stretch the floor and give you some three-point shooting, and that is not the forte of Marshall. Marshall's right now shooting 27% from three-point range. That's a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball. Jalen Spear, who comes in from Florida A&M, just does not duplicate the north of 14 points per game that he supplied for them, just 7 points per contest. Now, I do like Dezane Mingo, who's done a nice job rolling out some clean offense, 5 assists, 11 points per game, shooting 30% from three, which is above average for the team. And Mikkel Dawson is able to give you about 11 points per contest, but you just don't have that guy that's really able to hurt you from the outside. And for this Ohio unit, you got the AJs, AJ Clayton along with AJ Brown, who have really been able to supply some good offense for this bunch, with Clayton being a do-it-all low-post player, 2 blocks, 7 boards, 16 points per game. Not shooting it well from three, but he's able to pop it from three-point range at right around about 6'8", and then AJ Brown shoots 37% from three, 11.5 points per game. And then you've got Jackson Pavelski, who's been the main facilitator for the team, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 12 points per game. Overall, a career north of 35% three-point shooter. Hasn't been quite that this far this season, but you've also got a little bit of help with the 3 assists, 9.5 points per game of Sharif Mitchell, but he's been missing for quite a while for the team. Probably going to be out the fold once again for this game, but wow, they're doing a nice job throwing up nice, clean offense, only about 11 turnovers per game. They force a few steals, as you've had A.J. Brown be able to give you steal per contest. Aiden Headaway has been a nice, versatile piece, giving you about a steal and a half, 4.5 boards, 11 points per game at 6'8", so do like his overall game. For Marshall, again, they should be able to have a nice advantage down low, but they're not quite generating the same amount of steals as in past years, and their lack of three-point shooting against an Ohio team that has been well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis is going to be so costly, because they do such a nice job of being able to execute on the offensive side of things, and I think that their style just really travels really well in this spot. Did some my total 156.5. I think that the lack of three-point shooting for Marshall hurts you with this total, so in on the 157 under, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number here with Ohio. 647, 648 on the main board. SMU is playing us to LSU. LSU, a 4.5 to a 5-point underdog. This is from the Camarese Center, and your total on this game, it is 153.5 to 154. This is a neutral court game, but let's call it what it is. This is a game that's out there in the great state of Texas, but even with that, I'm going to be willing to take the points with LSU. I was willing to take anything north of 4 with them, and for this SMU unit, I mean, it's been a team that has really been looking to crank up their tempo. They've been able to do a nice job with Kevin Boopy Miller coming in from Wake Forest, and we've seen what the Wake Forest offense has been without him, and he has made some great contributions with SMU, giving you 15 points, 5.5 assists per game, and then Matt Cross down low is able to give you 8 rebounds per game. With Corey Chess has done a great job down low for this LSU team as well, with 8 boards per game. The big key for LSU, taking care of the ball. They've turned the ball over about 14 times per contest. You've got Jordan Sears, who's been been a little bit of a main facilitator along with DJ Bailey. These two guys have been able to combine for about 6 assists per game. Sears is able to be a little bit more of, shall we say, a versatile threat, shooting 40% for 3, 15 points per contest. Bailey not really giving you as much from the outside, but Cam Carter is just a nice off-the-ball scorer. 17 points per game. He's able to do a little bit of facilitating when needed as well, but he's been able to pop it at a clip of about 40% from three-point range for LSU. They've been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their defense as well. Their numbers are very much warped because they played that triple overtime game against Central Florida. Both teams got to north of 100 points in that one, so that does make their numbers look a little bit less on defense than what they are, and it also just adds many more possessions per game than what they typically have. But this is still a team that ranks in the top 40 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For SMU, more around 66th in the country, and they do give up north of 14 points more per 100 possessions on the road rather than at home. It has been an SMU team that, to their credit, though, has been able to lock down a little bit more recently. 72 points for fear allowed each of their last 3 games, and big reason why they've been a little bit better recently on defense. Cement Yedoglu missed the first few games of the season. The freshman from Turkey was 7'2", 265. He's made some nice contributions down low, a block, 6.5 rebounds per game. But I do think that even though SMU has been a very rock-solid team with regards to their offense, LSU going to do just enough on defense to hold in there. With this being a neutral court game out there in Frisco, I think that causes both of these teams to be a little bit more off with their three-point shooting. Right now, I'm seeing that total at a 154 to 154.5. Semi-total 154, so 154.5 is my buy point on the under, and I'm willing to take anything north of 4 with LSU. 649, 650 on the betting board. North Carolina is going to be playing us at LaSalle. The Explorers cover as 20.5 point underdogs. The last game is between 164, seeing a 164.5 out there as well. Did semi-total 160. I'm in on the under. I keep just going back to this with the North Carolina unit. They just keep getting off to really rough starts. I'm not sure what's happening with them, but they seem to forget how to play basketball in the first half, and then they pick it up in the second half. So if you're really looking for a first half play, there you go, just fading North Carolina moving forward in the first half until they show you something else. I think it's not the world's worst look, but you do have for North Carolina a trio of guys that are combining for about 15 rebounds per game. Jalen Withers, Van Allen, Lubin, and Jalen Washington, and all 3 guys are giving between 6 and 6.5 points per game. Not a lot of versatility there. RJ Davis continues to give you 18 points per game. He just hasn't been the same player that he has been in past years. He's not turning the ball over, but he's shooting 24% from three-point range, going up against the LaSalle unit that has been pretty good in the backcourt. Corey McKeithen has come in from Ryder, and he's been great, shooting 40% from 3, 19 points, 3.5 boards, 3 assists per game. I like what I'm seeing out of him, and for LaSalle, they've done a solid job of just cleaning up their turnover woes that have hurt them in past years. Only about 11 turnovers per game. Julia White has been able to slide the team with 12.6 rebounds per game. I know that there were question marks with him. Demetrius Lilly was dealing with a little bit of an injury as well. He's been able to give the team 7.5 rebounds per game. All reports are that they should be good to go in this game, which is a big reason why I'm willing to take the points with LaSalle, set them as more of an 18-point underdog for LaSalle. Certainly a team that still leaves a little bit of something to be desired defensively in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, about 131st in all of college basketball. But North Carolina, we've seen them get gashed quite a bit, especially at home in that game against Alabama. They're outside the top 170 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is not a LaSalle team that plays super slow. It's not a LaSalle team that guns it either, but I do think that they've got enough from the outside, being able to have Andres Marrero and DeLucy Jones be able to combine for about 16, 17 points per game to be able to hold in there against a North Carolina team that has had Elliott Kadu do a solid job doling out the ball. You've had Seth Trimble shoot 50% from 3 with 16 points per contest, but just feels like a very top-heavy unit with their backcourt doing amazing work, but not getting a ton down low. So I'm in on the under, semi-total 160, and I'm willing to take those points with LaSalle. 651, 652 on the betting board. Central Michigan, they hit the road. They're facing up against Valparaiso. The Crusaders of Valparaiso find themselves as a point favorite total on this game between 143.5 to 144, and it's semi-total 144.5. I do like the over for Valparaiso. They have been cranking up their tempo a little bit more here in recent years, and call what it is with this Valparaiso team. Not necessarily the greatest offensive team in the world, 233rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It is a Central Michigan team that they themselves have been well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. We'll say for Central Michigan, to their credit, they actually have been a top 50 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they have been away from home. That said, I still think that you get an over because with Valparaiso, I like what I'm seeing out of just the collective of these guys because they have Isaiah Stafford, who's probably going to be out for the season, suffered a rough injury in the offseason, but you've had a trio of guys be able to step up as Trey Schmidt, Jefferson, De La Cruz, Monegro, along with Cooper Schweiger, all be able to give you between 11 to 12 points per contest. The Maryland Eastern short transfer, Davion Ellis, he's giving you right around about 10.5 points per game as well. De La Cruz, Monegro has been able to give you 2.5 assists, so less than 2 turnovers per game. You don't have great three-point shooting with Valparaiso shooting just 32% from the outside, but they're keeping it clean. They're only turning the ball over about 9.3 times per contest. They're looking a little bit more down low. And then Darius DiViero, giving you about 4 assists per game, being a little bit more of a defensive stopper, has been very helpful for Valparaiso. For Central Michigan, I do think that their offense is going to be going in the right direction, as you do have a trio of guys, and Anthony Pritchard along with Jacoby Heedy and Kyler Vanderjagt all give you at least 12.5 points per game. They're shooting 35% from 3. The turnovers have been just killing them, though. 14.5 turnovers per game. They should be able to win the battle down low. I go back to when Central Michigan played a few weeks ago against Marquette. They actually pounded them on the glass in that one, as you've been able to get some relatively good versatility, about 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game out of Uganis Jaravisis, who's also been able to shoot 47% from 3-point range. I think that that's going to be going downward a little bit, but you've been able to get right around about 3.5, 4 rebounds per game out of Brian Najoja. You've got a lot of guys just in general that are able to give you some solid rebounding, but again, just not having a lot in terms of the turnovers. This team doesn't necessarily execute at the free throw line, while Valparaiso, they shoot north of 80% of the charity stripe. I think that that's big for a Valparaiso team that has gone past 70 points so far their last 5 games. We've seen the Central Michigan team be able to crank up their offense a little bit more as well, even going on the road, scoring 70 against George Mason. That speaks to me a little bit, so it does feel like Central Michigan finding their bearings on offense. Valparaiso, I think, is going to do a nice job taking care of the ball, and that'll allow them to get the job done. So set my line at 4.5. I'm willing to lay the small number with Valparaiso, and at a 144 or less in on the over. 653, 654 on the betting board. This is a part of the I guess they're calling it Orange Bowl Classic between Florida State and Tulane. This is going to be a neutral court game out there in the state of Florida. Florida State, a 10 to 10.5 point favorite. Tonight's game is between 148 to 148.5. Set my line at 9.5. I do think that Florida State should be the favorite, but I'm going to take 10 plus here with Tulane. For Tulane, it's been a team that has been all over the place. They were going through a 4+ game losing streak prior to just absolutely pounding the tar out of Southern Miss a few days ago, and it's a Southern Miss team that is not good, but I do think that Tulane is going to be able to find their bearings a bit more. The big key for Florida State is generating turnovers. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but one thing that Tulane has done a relatively good job of is taking care of the ball. They shoot 76% of the free throw line, 35% from 3 with 11 turnovers per game, while still being a mildly up-tempo team. Rome Brumba, who comes over from Georgetown, has been able to do a nice job running this offense. 5 assists, 13.5 points per game, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, while Caleb Banks shoots north of 40% from 3, 16.3 points per game, and Cam Williams has been able to step up in recent games for the team as well. He's been a part-time starter as a freshman. They've been giving him more minutes recently. He's shooting 40% from 3 at 6'8". That sort of size is big against a Florida State team that they always have that ideal size. Florida State, once again, going back to that system where they play like 9 or 10 guys deep, and you've got Jameer Watkins as that main headline guy with 17.5 points, 5 rebounds, and a steal and a half per contest, but you just don't have that same level of depth that you've had in past years. By that, I mean the abilities of guys like 6 through 9, just not where it was when they were making their runs to the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago. Now, I like what Malik Ewan is able to give you down low. He's been able to supply the team with 7 boards, 12.5 points per game after a rough start to the season. He seems to be finding his bearings, but outside those two guys, you don't have a single guy that gives you north of 8.5 points per game. Really, outside of the UW Milwaukee transfer and Justin Thomas, you don't have a lot of 3-point shooting either. This team shoots about 31.5% from the outside. They don't necessarily do the world's most amazing job on the glass. So Florida State, I do have my question marks here. They were able to pound these lesser teams like Western Carolina and company, and they look good in that event out in the great state of Connecticut, but when they've stepped up in competition, when they've gone up against more up-tempo teams, they've had their issues. Did set my total 147.5. I do think that this game gets a little bit more sloppy, and Tulane has been slowing down their tempo a little bit more with this game being on a neutral court. I think that'll throw off the shooting just a little bit, so in on the under, but I'm going to take double figures here with Tulane. 655, 656 on the betting board. It is IU Indy on the road against Lindenwood. Lindenwood is a 2-point underdog. Total on this game is 143.5. With Lindenwood, I did set them as an underdog of 3.5 points, so I'm actually going to be one to lay this with IU Indianapolis. Paul Carasso has come in and he's done a really nice job of being able to take a bunch of guys that were D2 guys just a season ago and get them competing at this level. Paul Zelinkas, he's come over and he's been able to give this team 19 points per contest from three-point range. He's shooting 46% from three, and IU Indy is running some good offense. 11.5 turnovers per game. They shoot 36.5% from three-point range. They've got a guy in Sean Craig who should be able to win the battle down low, 10.9 rebounds per game. Now, it is an IU Indy team that is a little bit top-heavy. Would like to see a little bit more from some of these guys like a Keenan Gardner, a freshman who's come in, giving you about 5 points, 5 rebounds per game, but they're coming along for the ride. Alec Mullender has been able to give you some nice facilitation out there in the backcourt as well. Meanwhile, you've got a Lindenwood team that they shoot 30% from 3, 64% the free throw line, outside the top 250 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're just very top heavy. Reggie Bass is someone that began his career over at Central Michigan along with Kent State, and I expected much more than 7.5 points per game out of him. Like, he was scoring more in the MAC the last few seasons than he's been scoring for this Lindenwood team. That is not a good sign. Markeith Browning, who comes on over from UW Milwaukee, he's been your main trigger man in terms of being able to dole out the ball. 11 points, 3.5 assists, 2 steals per game. Problem is, he shoots also 16% from three-point range, while Jaden Jones down low has been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. At 6'5", he's like the only guy on this roster that's able to grab a rebound, though. That's a big issue. And for IU Indy, typically they're the team that's outgunned with regards to size and ability to pull in their rebounds. They actually have an advantage here against a Lindenwood team that's just so top-heavy but doesn't have anything down low whatsoever. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number with IU Indy, set them as a 3.5-point favorite, and did set my total at 145.5 as well. You've got a Lindenwood team that is a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, but IU Indy does feel like they're looking to crank things up a little bit more with their offense. I think that they're going to execute in this game. So I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with IU Indianapolis. 657, 658 on the betting board. UC Irvine, Zot, the Anteaters are on the road against Oregon State, and Oregon State, 2.5 to 3-point favorite. So on this game is 136 to 136.5. I like the Anteaters outright on the money line. I did set them as a 2.5-point favorite with Oregon State. It's been really a nice renaissance here for them. I was not expecting this from them one bit, but they've done a nice job executing on offense, and they've just gotten really good versatility out of Michael Rataj, who has been their top scorer, 16.5 points. He's able to give them 9.5 rebounds per game, and despite standing right around about 6'9" or so, he's able to shoot 40% from three. Oregon State as a whole, they're shooting 38.9% from the outside. You've gotten unexpected contributions from Nate Kings, who's come in from the non-D1 ranks. He's been able to give you 12 points, shooting 56% from three-point range. Certainly should see a little bit of a fall off there, but team has been very efficient with the ball, only turned the ball over about 11.5 times per game, with DeMarco Minor coming over from SIU Edwardsville, and he's been very efficient. Not necessarily a dynamo scorer at 9 points per game, but 6 assists, 2.5 steals, 4.5 rebounds per game. I'll turn the ball over just 2 times per contest. A little bit of a top-heavy team. Would like to see Mike Marsh give you a little bit more, as he has been a bit of an afterthought for this team, and that's where I think that UC Irvine is going to be able to take advantage. UC Irvine has so much good switchability down low, and they've been able to do such a tremendous job on defense for this UC Irvine team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Number 7 in all of college basketball, and if you just look at road games, only Tennessee is allowing fewer points on a per possession basis, as you got the 7-footer and Ben Lutken, who's been leading the way for the team, 8.5 boards, 15.5 points per game, shooting 44% from three-point range and north of 7 feet tall. It's been absolutely amazing what we've been seeing out of him for an Irvine team that they're 13th in the country with regards to rebound rate. In terms of their road rebound rate, a top 10 team in all of college basketball. They lose their main facilitator last year in Pierre Cockrell, and Justin Owen has done a nice job picking up the mantle. 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 12 points per game, shooting 38% from three. It is an Irvine team that they do need to clean up the 13 turnovers per game, but they do the little things at the free throw line well, as each of your top 5 scorers and 6 out of your top 7 shoot at least 80%. The free throw line has collective 82.4%. Miles Shea, who comes on over from Chattanooga, he's been able to get the team 8 points per contest. Seven Tillis, 14 points, 8 boards. I just think that the stretchability, the size, and just what you get out of this UC Irvine team in terms of doing the little things well, being able to be up, is going to be able to win in this circumstance. I do think that Irvine is going to turn this into a little bit more of a controlled defense-oriented game. Semi-total 134.5. I like the under. I know that Corvallis is tough to get to, but I think that Irvine gets the job done. I like them outright on the money line. 659, 660 on the betting board. It is Washington State, and they play some Missouri State. Missouri State does find themselves as the 11 to 11.5 point underdogs. The last game, it is 142.5 to 143, and semi-line at 11.5. At 11 and 11 exactly, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Washington State for Washington State. Certainly has been a teeter-totter short a year for them as they've been dealing with a few injuries, the main one being to their top scorer in Cedric Coward, who's been able to supply the team going back to his time at Eastern Washington last season with about 14 to 15 points per contest. And I say going back to his time with Eastern Washington as 4 of the top 6 scorers from Eastern Washington last season, including the coach David Riley, now over here at Washington State. One of those guys that wasn't with them last year is Nate Kalmezi, who's been the main facilitator. 2 steals, 4.5 assists per game. Flowing some good offense for a Washington State team that they shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. They take high percentage shots when they get them, but they have been turning the ball over too much with about 14.5 turnovers per game. You're probably going to need a little bit more down low out of guys not named Luan Watts, as Watts has been great with 8 rebounds, 12.5 points per game, but other than Cedric Coward, you've only got one other guy in Ethan Price who gives you north of 5.5 boards per game, but he stands right around 6'8". He's shooting 37.5% from 3. Dane Eric Strupp stands 6'10". He's shooting 36.5% from the outside. Just so much stretchability for Missouri State to try to match up with, as they've been able to get about 9.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game out of Jalen Hampton, who's come up from the non-D1 ranks and has been rock solid, as his team did look to a lot of junior college transfers along Des White, who was over at Austin Peay, to be able to give the team production for White. 19 points per game, shooting 38.5% from 3, but Missouri State has that same issue with regards to turnovers. They're turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game, and just a perimeter play has been sloppy in general, ranking 255th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Shoots up to north of 38% when they are away from home. And I will say for Missouri State, top 100 team with regards to rebound rate, despite the fact that they might not have ideal size. You do have a Washington State team that's really been starting to D up a little bit more as well. 73 points or fewer surrendered in 3 of their last 4 games, so they're running in the right direction there. It is a Washington State team that's looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo. That goes back to their time over at Eastern Washington, so this is a interesting circumstance with this total at a 143. I set mine at a 149.5. I'm going to be in on the over. Got a Missouri State team that they themselves have given up 75 plus in 3 of their last 4 games. It's been a little bit of a slog for Missouri State on defense, with them just giving up a couple too many open looks from 3. I think that Washington State going to be able to execute. So I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be able to lay it with Washington State up to 11, 661, 662 on the betting board. This is from Mohegan Sun, as you've got Providence, and they are going to be playing against a Bonaventure, the Bonnies, who find themselves as a 3.5 to 3-point underdog. It's on this game between 127.5 to 128. I like the Bonnies here outright on the money line. I set them as a 3-point favorite. Now, I know that Providence is coming off of a nice road win against DePaul, where it looked like that game was going to be going into the abyss, and then DePaul was able to really do a nice job of toilet bowling that game. But that's it for Providence, even with Bryce Hopkins back out there. And Bryce Hopkins, in his first few games back, he's been looking relatively solid. In 3 games back, averaging 17 points, 7.5 boards. This is a completely different team when he's out there on the floor. They still do have their liabilities in the backcourt. Bentley Joseph, Jaden Pierre, they've been able to combine for about 25 points per contest, but they are still turning the ball over 12.5 times per game. It's a Providence team that has been a little bit touch and go with their defense. We saw them in that game against Davidson really give it up, and then we saw them against BYU a few nights later when you did get Bryce Hopkins back in the fold, and they look significantly better there. This is a Providence team that I just feel like they need to get a little bit more out of some of their ancillary guys. Wesley Carded has been able to do a solid job being able to give the team right around about 8 to 9 points per game, but Christ Edesonko, he's been able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game, but this is not necessarily the world's greatest team on the glass, and I do think that that's where they're going to be a little bit exploited in this game. If you look at just raw points allowed on a per possession basis for Providence, right around about 53rd in all of college basketball, do think that they are going to get it taken to them here, and I do think that in this sort of a circumstance, you're going to get the Bonnies to be able to play better defense, to be able to generate those turnovers, and with St. Bonaventure, they're a top 15 team in all of college basketball, not allowing you to get to the free throw line. They don't foul very much, and I do think that they stay within sorts, and feel like they should be the favorite in this game. So I set St. Bonaventure as a 2.5 to 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line. I'll be writing up this game as well. And then with regards to the total, I think that St. Bonaventure going to turn this into a nice slow slog, set my total at 125, so I'm also in on this total under. 663, 664 on the betting board. It is Utah Valley on the road against Jacksonville State, another game that I wrote up. Jacksonville State between a 2 to a 3-point favorite. Total on this game, 141.5. I feel like Utah State should be more of a 6-point underdog, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Jacksonville State, and I'm going to be writing them up with this Jacksonville State team. I actually really like like what I'm seeing with having one of the better scorers in all of college basketball. As Jerron Pierre has come in, he's been able to give the team north of 22 points per contest, and he has really been cooking for this unit. And they're going up against the Utah Valley team that has been getting cooked on offense, giving up the ball north of 14 times per game with regards to turnovers. Dominic Nelson has been solid. He's been able to give you 13.5 points, 6 boards per contest, and I like what the Welling brothers are able to do down low, as Connor Welling has been your main man, 13 points, 6.5 boards, stands 6'9". He shoots 38% from 3-point range, but Hayden Welling is also supplying 6.5 points. He's able to shoot it okay from 3-point range, about 32%, which is team average for the team. They're shooting about 32.5% as a collective. We've got a team that's very unselfish on the glass, with Utah Valley having each other top 5 scorers being able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game, and they're a top 50 team with regards to rebound rate. Problem is, Jacksonville State is even better. They're a top 35 team with regards to rebound rate. Mason Nicholson has supplied the team with about 8 boards, a block per contest. You're getting about 11 points, 8.5 rebounds per game out of Michael Hoagie. It's a Jacksonville State team that has also been able to do a nice job of staying disciplined as well. Less than 10 turnovers per game. So even though Jayo Otika is still coming along for the ride, he dealt with injuries the last few seasons after being a really nice dynamo scorer over at Marist. He's starting to find his way, and Jamar Franklin is someone that I really like as well. Shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Last year was over at Jacksonville State. This year, he's been able to give the team 10 points per contest as well. And with Atika, he's now shooting 45% from 3-point range. You've also got Marcelius. Bring him down low, so able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. The Jacksonville State team has relatively solid depth. They stay within themselves. Utah Valley is a team that's not shy to run, but now with Jacksonville State, they've got the firepower to be able to play in a little bit more of an up-tempo game as well. Interesting circumstance here. I did set my total at a 144. I do think that with Jacksonville State, they've turned over a little bit of a new leaf. You've got a Utah Valley team that's been getting torched on defense, 77 plus points allowed in 4 of their last 5 games. So I do like this total over, and I do like Jacksonville State laying the number, and I'll write that one up. Well, we'll write this one up as well, as we've got 665, 666 on the betting board. It is Louisville, and they're going to be on the road against Kentucky. Kentucky does find themselves as favorites of 11 to 10.5 points total on this game, between 158 to 160, and I set my total at 154.5. I wrote this up with the middle number at a 159, and I wrote up the under. I'm willing to take the points with Louisville as well. 11 is my minimum buy point there, and the reason why I wrote up this total under is because with Kentucky, we saw it in that game against Colgate. It was the first time all season in a true home game in which they failed to get past 80 points, and I think that the injuries to Lamont Butler along Kirk Risa are really going to start to catch up with this backcourt. Now for Kentucky, still have a guy in Kobe Brea who's shooting 50+% from 3-point range. Otego away, he's been able to do a nice job with 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but you can only take so many injuries to that backcourt before the product starts to suffer a little bit, and Lamont Butler had an assist-to-turnover ratio of 3. Kirk Reese was doing a good job doling it out. Now they're going to need to rely a little bit more on Amari Williams in this game, who he should be able to win that battle down low. He's been able to supply the team with 10-plus points, 9 rebounds per game in Louisville, as dealing with Keyshawn Pryor being out. He was one of their top guys down low, so now you've got Javon Hadley along James Scott, who have been able to combine for about 14 rebounds per game, about 17 points per game between the two of them, and Louisville should see a rise in their 3-point shooting. I'm writing up this under full well knowing that they're not going to continue to shoot 27% from 3-point range for forever, but they're outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers per possession. Chucky Hepburn has been able to give you a really nice effort. Top 5 player in the country in terms of steals per game, 3.2 steals, 5 assists, 14 points per contest, so that's been rock solid, while Terrence Edwards, he's supplied the team with 13 points per game, but you really don't have anyone outside of Rain Smith on this team shooting above 32.5% from 3-point range. He's been able to supply the team with 12 points per contest. You wonder how that's going to come along for Kentucky. You have to wonder about the ancillary pieces as well, because now more is on the plate of the likes of Jackson Robinson and company with the injuries that you've got in the backcourt. I do like what you're able to get down low for this team with Anthony Almoner being able to give you a bit of versatility as well, but I do think that Kentucky's offense gets slowed down by those injuries. I think that Louisville does just enough to hold in there, so at 11 plus taking the points with Louisville, and then he did right up the under. 667, 668 on the betting board. It is Illinois against Tennessee. Big one with Illinois being a home underdog of 1 to 2 points. It's all this game between 146.5 to a 147, and circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay it with Tennessee. I'm willing to lay up to 2 with them on the road. For Illinois, this has been a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've got a Tennessee team that this team is just a full package. They're able to do a nice job scoring. They're able to do a nice job defending. And I do think that they find a way to be able to get the job done in this spot with having Chaz Lanier being one of the best go-to scorers in all of college basketball. 19 points per game. We saw him shoot north of 40% from 3-point 3-point range. At North Florida, he's shooting even better this year at 48.6% from 3-point range. He has supplied the team with 18-plus points in each out of the last 5 games. You don't want to bet against the Chaz. And then Igor Milicic has really good versatility at 6'10". He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, 2.5 assists, 7.5 boards, 12.5 points per game. Now, Tomislav Ivicic, he provides a lot for this Illinois team as well. He's giving you 9.5 boards, 15 points. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I like what I'm seeing out of Will Riley, shooting 40% from 3. Typically, he's been coming off the bench, giving you 14 points per game. And Kylan Boswell is keeping things clean for Illinois. They play at a relatively good tempo. They're turning the ball over just a little bit, over 11 times per game. Kasparas Jakunuskis, he's been really nice as well. I mean, this guy is doing it all. 15 points, 6.5 boards, 6 assists, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. So you've got two teams with a whole bunch of firepower on offense. You got two teams with a whole bunch of firepower on defense. It's going to be a fun one. I do, though, think that in the end, Tennessee just plays a little bit better defense. I think that they just have been around a little bit longer. And Zakai Ziegler, I think that the way that he just doles out the ball with 8 assists per contest, the way that he's able to run this offense, I think that that's going to be the difference. I do think that this is going to be a lower scoring game. I do think that Tennessee is very comfortable just playing a game in the high 60s, low 70s to be able to pull this one out. So I did set my total at 144.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 2 with Tennessee. 669, 670 on the betting board. Neutral court game at LeBron James Arena between Duquesne and Towson. Towson is a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and your total last game, it is between 126 and 126.5, and I did set Towson as a 2.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5 with them. For Duquesne, this is just a less than savory team right now. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're really not giving you a whole lot down low either. There's not a lot of redeeming qualities for this team, and they just need to find a way to be able to hit the boards a little bit better, as they were banking on Deshaun Corbett, who last year was at Chicago State, to give you a little bit more than the 5 boards and about 8.5 points per game. Then he's had Kareem Rozier. He's been able to give you about 3 assists, 8.5 points per game, but isn't really doing a lot for you offensively. Past years was more around about a 38% 3-point shooter. That's down to about 30.5% from the outside, and this team is also shooting 62% the free throw line. They're a low-tempo team with nearly 13 turnovers per game, and Maximus Edwards was a double-figure scorer over at George Washington last 2 seasons. He's been really struggling as well. He's only been able to give the team about 7.5 points per game, was limited at 13 minutes in their most recent game against Maine as well, went out with a little bit of an injury, so that's something that you want to be checking on as well. And then for Towson, you've had Dylan Williamson be able to give the team 15-plus points per contest. For Towson, they are outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, so they've done a nice job being able to slow things down, and they've had to because Christian May has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. Tyler Teata, when he's been out there on the floor, has been their top scorer, and they just got him back in their last game against UMBC, was able to put up an 18 spot in his first game back, so he is all good to go for this backcourt, and I think that they should be able to do a nice job on that front. And on top of that, Mekhi Lowry has been able to give you about 7 boards per contest. Even though Towson, not quite the same rebounding team as they were a season ago, backcourt is even better. They're turning the ball over just 10 times per game. Being able to get back Teata should allow them to be able to get the job done in this ordeal. So I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number with Towson. I set them as more of a 2.5 point favorite. And with regards to the total, I do think that you're in for a low scoring slog, but I think we've went a little bit too far with Teata being back. I set my total at 128.5, so I am in on this total over, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number of Towson. 671, 672 on the betting board. Richmond is going to be playing us Belmont. Belmont is between a 1 point favorite to a 1 point underdog, depending upon where you look. So flip of favorites, depending upon your book. 148.5 is the total, and I feel like Richmond should be the favorite. I set them at a minus 1.5, so I'll be willing to lay up a point with them / take them as a money line underdog for Richmond. It was less than savory what we saw from them against Auburn, but for Belmont, this continues to be a team that's well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I feel like they've had a little bit of fortune with regards to shots that they've gotten to fall this far this season. They're shooting 37% from 3-point range, with having Tyler Lundblade shooting north of 50% from 3-point range. He has come up from averaging less than a point per contest last 2 seasons over at TCU to being a 50% 3-point shooter. This is a Belmont team that flows some nice offense. They're only turned the ball over about 11 times per contest, despite being an up-tempo team. Carter Witt has been able to give you 4.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 11 points per game. I also do like the D2 transfer and Jonathan Pierre. He was over at that North of Southeastern team that won the national title 2 seasons ago. Just couldn't get out there on the floor for Memphis last year. He's doing it all. 3.5 assists, 7.5 boards, 12 points per game, shooting 39% from distance. So really love what he's been able to bring to the table. But I do think that for Richmond, their overall versatility with having Jonathan Beagle along with Espasis Romaglu, these two guys are going to be able to maintain down low with Romaglu. He's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Not really going to give you a lot of scoring, but blocks north of a shot per game. And then Jot the Beagle, the transfer from Albany, 3 assists, 6 boards, 9.5 points. He's able to pop it from 3, but doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3-point range. It's a Richmond unit that they do need to improve their outside shooting. They're shooting just 29% from 3-point range this season, but we've got a Belmont team that's very vulnerable with regards to their defense. They're actually allowing more points per possession, very interestingly, when they are on the road rather than when they are at home. But Belmont, in terms of that perimeter defense, they are allowing opponents to shoot in that neighborhood about 38% from 3-point range. That's 340th in all of college basketball. Delani Hunt has supplied the team with 19 points, just under 2 steals per game. Richmond really doesn't turn the ball over a lot themselves, and I do think that sooner rather than later, that Belmont defense, it's going to be nipping them in the bud. Richmond is looking to play a little bit more slowly, and I do think that they're going to be able to get their slower tempo in this game. I set my total at a 147.5, so I'm in on the under, and I do like Richmond in this spot as a money line underdog / one to lay up to 1 with them. 673, 674 on the betting board. This is from Safe Farm Marina. Georgia is going to be playing against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, a 5.5 to a 6.5 point dog. Total on this game is 148. I'm going to lay up to 6.5 with Georgia. I set them as a 7-point favorite. This is happening in their home state. And for Grand Canyon, I just have been off-put by what I've been seeing out of them. I love the fact that they brought back so many of their guys from the season ago, but I thought that you were going to be able to see just a better product in general as Tyon Grant Foster. He missed the first few games of the season, and ever since he's come back, he's looked like the same guy that we got from a season ago. 16 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals per contest. The 3-point shooting for him has been down, though. He's shooting about 25% from the outside for a Grand Canyon team that it used to be the forte of this team under Bryce Drew, that they would always play very good, rock-solid defense, and that just hasn't been the case this far this season. For Grand Canyon, they're allowing opponents to shoot from 3-point range right around about 35.5%. They're well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And while this Georgia team, they do sometimes get a little bit too fast for their own good, they've been able to do a nice job with Asa Newell being one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball. 6+ rebounds. He's been able to give the team north of 15 points per game. Georgia, they've got a few woes for themselves with regards to just finding a way to be able to knock down shots from the outside, but Dakota LaFew has been able to mask many of those. As for the Georgia team, 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, by the way, in LaFew. He shoots 41% from 3. For a core that shoots about 34% from 3-point range. 14 turnovers per game is a little bit less than savory, with Silas Demery giving you 13 points, 3 assists, but also turn the ball over about 3.5 times per game. But Ronald Godfrey has been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. Blue Kane, Tyron Lawrence, they're combining for about 9 rebounds per contest, 21 points per game. Both of these guys shooting the mid-30s from 3-point range. I like what I'm seeing on this Georgia team, with Newell being able to lead the way, being so versatile for this bunch. I think they take it to a Grand Canyon team that they've been missing quite a few guys this season. I was mentioning the Grant Foster injury. I know that for the first few games of the season, they were also without Duke Brandon, who's really their top rebounder with about 8 rebounds per game. Luke War has just not given you a ton. He transferred in from Oregon a few seasons ago, 8 points, 4 boards. He's been relatively okay, but for Grand Canyon, just been a little bit of a disappointment, and this Georgia team really doing a rock-solid job with regards to their defense. I did set my total at 149, as Grand Canyon has really been slipping up with regards to their defense, and Georgia playing out there in the home state, they should be nice and at home in this game. So do like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 here with Georgia. 675, 676 on the betting board. It is Davidson. They play out to Detroit. Detroit is a 15 to a 15.5 point underdog, and your total on this game is between 144.5 to a 145. And for Detroit, I did set them as an underdog of 15 points. At 15.5, that becomes my buy point. For Detroit, I actually like what I'm seeing out of Coach Monty right now. He's got these boys fighting hard, and that's more than what we could say last season for Detroit. They've already, what's the level above, quintupled their win total, because they went from 1 win to 5 wins. Actually, I do think that it's quintuple, because 4 is quadruple, but that said, with them, they've quintupled their win total, and you've got Orlando Lovejoy, who's really done a nice job of being able to supply this team with so much versatility. 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 2.5, 14.5 points per game, comes in from Eastern Michigan, and I mean, you've seen a lot of guys just transfer in and give this team nice outside shooting. They're right now shooting as collective about 36% from 3-point range. This is despite the fact that Mac Manciel has missed half the season. Jared Larry, he's been out of the fold for the last few games for the team, so that's been a little bit rough. He's been able to slide the team with 9 points per contest, but you've got Legend Geeter, who's been able to Geeter down with 9 points, 4 rebounds per game, and I was talking about Manciel and that injury. We have last seen him on November 20th. There's a chance that you might be able to get one of these guys back in. I am anticipating both of these guys being out. But in the meantime, while these guys have been out, Grant Godzrick, the second, he comes in as a freshman, pretty highly touted freshman. He's been able to give the team double figures in each of the last 3 games, and he's taken this opportunity, and that's provided Detroit with not too much of a fall-off despite their injuries. Meanwhile, for Davidson, you do have Reed Bailey, who's been able to give the team 18 points, 7 boards. He has been a do-it-all player, shooting 40% from 3, 3.5 assists per game, but it's a top-heavy team. You've got Connor Kachera, Bobby Durkin combining for 30 points, 8.5 boards. Durkin is shooting 42% from 3-point range. Outside those 3 guys, you don't have a single other player that gives you north of 3.7 boards or 7.5 points per game. They're running clean offense. They're only turning the ball over 9 times per contest, but typically with Davidson, they rely a lot on their 3-point shooting, and it's not bad, but it's not amazing. They're shooting about 33.5% from the outside. Davidson has been a little bit lackadaisical on defense, and by that I mean a whole heck of a lot lackadaisical. They're about 314th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, really giving it up from beyond the arc, and this team does not necessarily do the best job of being able to give themselves second and third chances on the glass as well. Now, Detroit does not either, but I do think that Detroit has just enough to be able to hold in this game. I did set my line at a 15, so at 15.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points. And with regards to this total, I did set mine more around a 145, just because even though neither of these teams play super up-tempo, they both have been quite, shall we say, inefficient with regards to their defense. So in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Detroit. 677, 678, another game I wrote up, as you've got San Diego on the road against Fresno State. And Fresno State right now a 5-point favorite. Your total on this game, when I wrote it up, it was more around about 152, 152.5. Now we're seeing as high as a 154 out there, and I did write up the under. I set my total at 147.5. These 2 teams are outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and 3-point shooting percentage. I really don't see why this total continues to shoot up. Now, Fresno State is playing at a relatively rapid pace. They are playing at a top 35 pace in terms of total possessions per game. I don't think that they're going to continue to shoot sub 28% from 3-point range for forever, but Vance Wahlberg comes in, and he was a high school coach last year. I don't know why they gave Vance Wahlberg this job. Amar Uliagard has been able to give you 14 points per contest. Right now, you've got one guy that shoots north of 30% from 3, and Zayon Collins has been able to give you 14 points, 4 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. Relatively good versatility there, but I question a lot with this team. I also question a lot with the San Diego bunch as well. They brought in nothing via the transfer portal. KJ Bradley has been a nice go-to scorer. He's been able to give the team 16 points per contest, but the San Diego team was just completely banking on a whole bunch of NAIA and Division II level transfers, and it just has not really worked out for them. They only returned one of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, Steven Jamerson, who's been fine. Down low, about a block, 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then you had this guy come up from the D2 level who's been able to give you about 7 points per contest, and Cody Clout, who has been dealing with a little bit of injury. He's become very ineffective for the team, about 13 points in the last 4 games for him, out of him as well. So that's been a bit of an issue. San Diego, not necessarily the world's worst rebounding team, as you've got Sebastian Truitt, who's been able to give you about 7.5 or so rebounds per game, but as a collective, San Diego shooting 26% from 3, and while I think that that's going to rise a little bit in this one, both of these teams have honestly been halfway decent with their defense. Both of these teams in the top 165 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a Fresno State team that has been getting a little bit bludgeoned recently, 80 plus points given up in each of their last 5 games, but one of those was a double overtime game. Then you play against Washington State, Santa Clara, BYU. I do think that this is going to be a game where neither of these teams are going to be approaching 75 points. Both of these teams have just had a really rough go of it on offense, but I do think that in the end, this Fresno State team going to be able to defend their home court. San Diego dealing with some injuries and just not really effective out there in the backcourt. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Fresno State, set them as a 5.5 point favorite, and wrote up the under as well. 679, 680 on the betting board. I will do this game, and then we'll take our first break. Dayton is going to be playing us Marquette. Marquette does find themselves as a 1-point road favorite. Total on this game, it is between 151 to 151.5. A little bit surprised that this number came out this low. I set Marquette as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 with Marquette. I just think that they have enough to be able to get the job done, despite the fact that they might be a little bit more vulnerable down low. You lose Oso Ogudero from the season ago, and they really haven't been able to replace that rebounding, and they weren't necessarily a great rebounding team to start with, as you've been able to have David Joplin give you about 5.5 boards per contest, 15 points per game, and he had 6'8". It's a little bit versatile, but Cam Jones, with him doling out 6.5 assists, so less than a turnover and a half per game, give you 20 plus points, still shooting 40+% from 3-point range. He's done a great job of filling the shoes of Tyler Kolek. And then for Dayton, Enoch Cheeks has been one of the more underrated players in college basketball. I love his game. 16 points, 7.5 boards, right now shooting 47% from 3. And anytime got Santos shooting 47% from three. As a matter of fact, your top three scorers that have made at least 1 3 this year, so that takes out Zed Key, they're all shooting at least 46.9% from the outside. I do think that there's going to be a bit of a fall off there. And again, I keep saying it. What is Posh Alexander in this offense? It feels like they've just been sort of experimenting to see what he's able to give them. One night he's going to give you some nice scoring like he did against UConn when he had 16 points in that game. The next night he's going to be a little bit more of a facilitator. To his credit, he's only turned the ball over 5 times in the last 5 games, but just feels like he's a little bit of a floater at this point with about 6.5 points per game. Zed Key's only been able to give you 4 rebounds per game as well. So while this is a Marquette team that has their issues on the glass, it's not like you've had the Satan team just completely lock down and completely dominate on the glass. I like what Malachi Smith is doing at the point guard spot. Fewer than 2 turnovers, about 5.5 assists per game, and Dayton has really been able to ascend with their offense, 77 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. Not necessarily a super up-tempo Dayton team, though. And for Marquette, this has been a top 10 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. We've seen them do a nice job with regards to their defensive prowess. I think that they're going to get this game played a little bit more slowly than a lot of people anticipate. I did set my total at 148. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay the 1 here with Marquette, and then we'll take our first break, and then we'll hit the rest of these games on the normal Las Vegas betting board right here on Coach with myself, David Peterson, now a part of the Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've gone through a lot of the normal Las Vegas betting board, but we've got a few games left. We're going to hit those here as we've got ourselves plenty of money to be made on this Saturday, so let's waste no more time.
Today's slate is especially large, so that just means more trips to the window. Hoops is dishing out a second half of bank shots.
681, 682 on the betting board. North Carolina A&T is on the road against Liberty. Old Liberty, a 19.5 to a 20-point favorite. Your total on this game is 144, and with Liberty, I did set them as a 21.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. North Carolina A&T has done a nice job not turning the ball over. They do a good job of having their main 2 scorers be able to take over games. That's Ryan Forrest along with Landon Glasper are combining for about 37 points per game. They really just don't have a ton down low. Nicolas Chidacutis has been able to give you about 8 boards, 8 points per game, but Zach Cleveland, I love his overall versatility for Liberty. 10.5 points, 6.5 boards, 5.5 assists. Not going to go out there and pop it from 3-point range, but you don't need him to because you've got a lot of guys around him, like Akeda Menethy, who's been able to give this team 13.5 points, shooting 43% from 3-point range, just able to do all of that. For Liberty, always a team that's outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. That's what Coach McLean and his group does as the coaching staff of this team. McLean, actually a little bit of a Tony Bennett disciple, and for this Liberty team, they've been able to do a nice job being able to lock it down on the defensive side of things as well. For Liberty, they're ranking 40th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you just look strictly at their home numbers, and it's a game against Mississippi Valley State that was lumped in there, top 12 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Well, you've been able to have the Minnesota transfer in 6'9" Isaiah Anhen be able to give you about 10.5 points, 4 boards per contest, shooting 38% from 3-point range. That's just versatility that I don't think that A&T is going to do a great job of being able to cope with. And for North Carolina A&T, they have certainly given a lot from the perimeter. And in terms of their overall defense, 277th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Do think that Liberty is able to get a lot of efficient offense going in this one. Did set my total at 141.5. Do think that this game is going to be just a little bit too slow to be able to get the over on. And we have been seeing this A&T team really struggling with regards to their offense as well. So I'm going to be in on this total under, and I'm willing to lay it with Liberty. 683, 684 on the betting board. This is from Lee's Family Forum out here in Henderson, Nevada. VCU and Colorado State do battle. Colorado State just find themselves as 6.5 point underdogs. Total on this game, it is between 135.5 to a 136, and with VCU, I did set them as 7-point favorites. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5. VCU finds themselves in the top 10 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It has been very impressive what we've been seeing on that front, and then you have a Colorado State unit that has really had a tough time in terms of their backcourt, trying to replace what they had from a season ago when you had Isaiah Stevens doing such a good job of being able to dish it out. For Colorado State, they're only shooting 30.5% from 3-point range. Niquay Clifford has been very good. 18 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. What are you going to get outside of he and Jalen Lake, with Lake being able to give the team 15 points per contest? You really don't have a lot of rebounding, as nobody outside of Clifford is able to give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Ethan Morton has been a relatively okay facilitator, but he's only giving you about 3 points per contest. So you need a little bit more there. And then for VCU, Joe Bamisiel has been really a takeover guy in the backcourt, and really this entire VCU backcourt has been absolutely tremendous. They bring in Philip Russell from UTSA. He's been able to supply the team with about 11.5 points per contest, shooting 39% from three-point range. Bamisiel's not really shooting it well from three, but gives you 5 boards, 16 points, 2.5 assists per game, and VCU has been able to do a much better job of being able to generate turnovers than they did a season ago as well. They're generating about 8 steals per game. Now they themselves need to clean up the 13 turnovers that they're committing as well, but you've been able to have Jack Clark along with Max Shulga combined for 13 rebounds per game. Shulga throws in there 3.5 assists, 16 points per game. Zeb Jackson, he was missing for a little bit of time earlier this season. He's been able to supply the team with 12.5 points per game. Getting him back has been big, though. He's been dealing with a little bit of ailment as well, so want to be checking in on his status. But even if you don't have a full goal of Zeb Jackson, you still have plenty in the backcourt for the team to be able to get the job done. I do think that VCU going to take it to a Colorado State team that just feels like they're in a little bit of transition with their offense. It's been a rough go of it for them, as in regulation only 67 points or fewer for them in 4 of their last 5 games. So circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay it with VCU. I set them as a 7-point favorite, and I did set my total at a 135 as well. So here at a 136, I'm going to be in on the under. 685, 686 on the betting board. Gonzaga is going to be playing against UConn. This is out there at MSG, Madison Square Garden, as Gonzaga a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite, and your total on this game is between 151.5 to a 152.5. For Gonzaga, this is my max buy point on them, but want to lay up to 2 with them. I did set my line at a 2.5 as for Gonzaga. I just think that they're going to be a little bit more clean in terms of their offense, as you've been able to have Ryan Nembhard doing an absolutely tremendous job of just transforming the team. He's giving out north of 9 assists per game, fewer than 2.5 turnovers per contest, and even though they lost that game against Kentucky about a week or so ago, I loved what I saw out of Graham Ike. Graham Ike came out there. He had a massive first half. I know he's been in a little bit of the doghouse of Mark Few throughout the season, but now it looks like he's been able to really find it once again. Still give you 16 plus points per contest. Still give you 6 plus rebounds per game as well. K-Leaf Battle from the outside, shooting 40 plus % from 3-point range. He's able to chip in there just a whole bunch of offense. And then on the flip side, you've got a UConn unit that it does feel like that result that they had in Maui was a little bit of an outlier. I don't think that they're as bad as team number 8 out of those 8 teams that were in that field by any stretch of the imagination, and you sometimes get wackadoo things that happen with regards to those tournaments. But for this UConn unit, they are going to need to get a little bit more from the ancillary guys, as Alex Caravan has really been shouldering the load for the team. 16.5 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, shooting 48% from 3-point range as a 6'8", bit of a combo player. You don't need a ton of offense out of Hassan Diarra. He's been able to do a nice job dishing it out. 5.5 assists to 2 turnovers per game, only about 8 points per game. But Ada Mahaney, I expected a little bit more than 5 points out of him per game. I thought that it would take him a little bit of time, but still you expect a little bit more there. Liam McNeely, the freshman, has been able to give you 12.5 points per game. And for UConn, they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per game. We have to have a fear that with a lot of UConn's metrics, that they're just padded by the fact that they played against Maryland Eastern Shore. They played against Mississippi State, teams like that towards the beginning part of the season. That's why they've got some of the most dramatic home and road splits in all of college basketball. Now, they did take it to Texas, giving up just 65 points in that game, and it does appear as though that defense is back in full force. And this is a Gonzaga team that they know all about offense. 89 plus points scored in 5 out of their last 6 games, so it's a situation of something's got to give. I do think that things are going to be a little bit slowed down in this game, and when you have 2 college basketball teams that play at Madison Square Garden, I don't know what it is, but feels like the sightlines are just a little bit off. These guys, they get a little bit skittish, and they have a tough time being able to knock down threes. So this is a game where I did set a little bit of a lower total. I set mine at a 148.5. I'm in on the under, but want to lay up to 2 with Gonzaga. 687, 688 on the betting board. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma do battle from the Paycom Center, and with Oklahoma, they're 4.5 to 5 point favorites. So on this game, it is 153.5. Set Oklahoma's 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Oklahoma. I really like what I'm seeing out of this unit. And Oklahoma State, I will say, they've been able to put together a relatively solid start to the season as well. First year under their new coach in Steve Lutz, he's been solid, but with Oklahoma State, they are about 148th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Oklahoma, they're more around 62nd with that regard. So that's something I think is going to be popping up in this game. For Oklahoma, they just have been able to give you much more on the glass recently as well. For Oklahoma State, it's a little bit more of a whole is greater than some of its parts approach. And for Oklahoma State, you've been able to get quite a bit of production out of some of these guys that followed Lutz on over from Western Kentucky, like Brandon Newman, who's been able to give you about 8 points, 5 rebounds per contest, and Abdu Usman has been able to do a solid job giving you about those 5 boards, 12.5 points per game. Was the main rim protector for North Texas 2 years ago when they made their NIT run. But for Oklahoma, Jalen Moore has been able to give you more, 18 points, 6 rebounds, shooting 38.5% from three-point range, while Duke Miles is shooting 47% from the outside. And it's also a unit that has done a great job of being able to generate steals. Oklahoma, a top 30 team in the country in terms of steals forced on a per possession basis. Now they're getting back Bryson Gudine as well, guy that missed the first 3 games of the season. He's been a nice go-to scorer, doesn't really give you a lot outside of outside shooting, but he's right now shooting 46.5% from three-point range. And Jeremiah Fears does need to tame down on the 3.5 turnovers per game, but he's been able to do all the ball really well, find these guys some good, nice, open looks. And for Oklahoma State, you're going to be very reliant upon the backcourt to be able to help these guys out, like Bryce Thompson, who's standing 6'8", shooting 40% from 3, 11.5 points per contest. You've had Khalil Brantley come on over from LaSalle, 3.5 assists, 8.5 points per game. And Terry Dean, he's been one of the top steals leaders in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, led all of college basketball in terms of steals per game 8 seasons ago. He's been able to generate about 2.5 per contest himself, but I do look at this circumstance. I do think that for Oklahoma, they do find a way to be able to get the job done against an Oklahoma State team that has become a little bit more upstart. But I do think that when it's all said and done, Oklahoma going to be able to dominate on the glass with Sam Godwin also being able to give you 6+ rebounds per game. So I do like Oklahoma in this spot. I set them as a 6-point favorite with both of these teams. I think that they're going to be able to turn steals into offense. I do think that both of these teams are going to turn the ball over a little bit less than what we anticipate. So did set my total at a 152. So here at the 153.5 and on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Oklahoma. 689, 690 on the betting board. It is UMKC playing us at Bowling Green. Bowling Green is a underdog of 2.5 to 3 points. Total on this game is 143, and I did set my total at 142, so here at the 143, I'm in on the under. Recognize that UMKC has been outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you got a Bowling Green team that I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time being able to make their threes, and I do think the UMKC just moving forward is going to be a little bit of better defense. I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Here at the 3, I'm going to be willing to take those points with this Bowling Green unit. I think that there might be a little bit of regression coming with regards to their 3-point shooting overall, but I do like what I'm seeing in the backcourt, even with Trey Thomas being a bit of a disappointment. He was the top scorer from a season ago. He's only been able to give the team right around 10 points per contest, as it's really been the Marcus Johnson show for them, supplying the team with 18.5 points per game. It is a Bowling Green team that they lack a little bit of something down low, other than Sam Towns, who's been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. Only guy in the roster giving you north of 4.3 boards per contest, but Johnson's been able to shoot 36.5% from 3-point range. Javante Campbell has been able to give you 2.8 steals per game. He's shooting 35.5% from the outside. Bowling Green does a nice job of not getting out of sorts as well, shooting north of 80% on the free throw line. They're turning the ball over just 7.5 times per game, so they're doing the little things well. While this is a UMKC team that's very top heavy, you've got Anderson Kopp along with Jamar Brown, or pretty much do-it-all guys. With Brown, 15 points, 7 boards, 2 steals per game, shooting 39.5% from 3. Kopp shoots 37.5% from 3 with his 12.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. But outside of that, you really don't have a lot in terms of rebounding, in terms of scoring in general, and they really base their offense around those 2 main guys. Now, Melvin Ibakoli, who hopefully I said that correctly, gentleman from France, he's been able to give you 5.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job. I'll be able to lock things down low. And for UMKC, we have really seen the struggles of this offense with them turning the ball over a little bit over 12.5 times per game. And their numbers are very much warped if you look at D1 versus non-D1, because they had that game against like Calvary College where they quite literally won the game by 100 points. You don't see that happen very often, and they somehow, some way managed to be able to do so. But for UMKC, I do think that they're starting to find their bearings a little bit more on defense, giving up just 64 points a few days ago over at Portland. Meanwhile, for this Bowling Green unit, it has been all over the place in terms of their offense, as they have scored 70 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games, but just popped off for 102 against Morgan State. So, situation, something's got to give. UMKC is a little bit more of a lower tempo team. I do think that they're going to slow things down, but the little things keep Bowling Green lively in this one. So, going to be willing to take anything north of a deuce with Bowling Green. Set my total at 142, so I'm also in on this total. Under 691, 692 on the betting board. Alabama plays us Creighton. Creighton 11.5 to 12-point underdogs. So last game is 163.5. I did set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Creighton. Fully recognize that Papa Isaacs is going to be out of the lineup for this team, but even with that, you still have Steve Ashworth. He was dealing with a little bit of an injury. He's back. He's been able to get the team 15 plus points per contest. It's not the same Creighton 3-point shooting dynamo that we've seen in past years, but You're going to need Ryan Kalkbrenner to step up, and I do think that, for lack of a better term, he's going to not necessarily be in step-up mode, but at the same time, I think that he's going to be better than what we've seen in these step-up games, because when it comes to Ryan Kalkbrenner against sub-200 teams in KenPom, he's always been a dominator, and when it comes to the actual opponents that are big-time, he has not been, but that said, he's still giving the team 17 points, 8.5 boards, a little bit over 2.5 blocks per contest. I think that he's going to have himself a solid day, but now for Alabama, you've got multiple big men that you're able to throw at him. You now have Cliff Omarui, who's a little bit more of that traditional low post presence, who's done a solid job, be able to haul in for the team right around about 6 boards, 8 points per game, gives you some shot blocks, and then Grant Nelson from the outside has been shooting about 30% from 3, 13 points per game for an Alabama team that they're only shooting about 33% from 3-point range, should be going northward even with losing Latrell Wrightsell, because now you're going to have Chris Youngblood, who's averaging 15 points per contest last year at South Florida, being able to take his spot, so that's big. But still, with Alabama, it's a team that's been playing better on defense than they did a season ago. Last season, they were well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and with an up-tempo team like Alabama, you can't just take a look at the raw points and be like, oh, they're great, or oh, they're terrible with regards to their defense, but still, 121st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, leaves a little bit of something to be desired, not necessarily putting a lot of pressure on the ball in terms of generating turnovers, so Creighton should be able to get some good looks at the basket. I do think that they do just enough to be able to cover this game. Do think that it's going to be a high-scoring, up-tempo game. I did set my total at a 166.5. That's just the way that Alabama plays, and that is what we should be getting in this one, as I do think that Alabama, again, going to see an upward tick with their three-point shooting, so I'm in on the over, but 9+ taking those points with Creighton. 693, 694 on the betting board. This is from Mountain America Center. That is out there in the state of Idaho. Boise State and St. Mary's who battle. St. Mary's is a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 138.5, and with St. Mary's, I did set them as a underdog of 1.5 points. I like Boise State outright on the money line because this is a game out there in the state of Idaho. I do think that that is going to be playing very big in terms of just this Boise State team in general, and I do think they're for Boise State, even though they've left a little bit of something to be desired in terms of their defense this season as compared to past years. I like the overall versatility that you've got with the likes of Tyson Dagenhart along with Omar Stanley. We're able to stretch to the perimeter with Dagenhart. The three-point shooting has been a little bit wonky this year, but still 17 points, 6 boards, and then additionally with Stanley, he's been able to get the team right around about 9 points, 6 rebounds, a little bit over a block per contest, and unlike last year with this Boise State team, you finally have a main trigger man at the point guard spot. Alvaro Cardenas is able to give you 10 points, 6 assists for a team that's only turned the ball over about 10.5 times per game. I do think that their 31.5% three-point shooting is going to go northward. This is not the same Boise State team from three-point range as they had with Chibuzo Agbo a few seasons ago, but I do think that they're going to be able to rise up a little bit with that regard, and St. Mary's now outside the top 35 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Typically, we see them be a little bit better with that regard. Still one of the best teams in the country with regards to rebound rate. Luke Barrett has stepped into a bigger role with about 7.5 rebounds per game, and the guy that has actually been leading the way for this team, Paulius Marasuskis, hopefully I said that correctly, the 6'8" gentleman from Lithuania, 9.5 boards, 15 points. He's been able to pop it out about a 32.5% clip from three-point range. Actually shot north of 50% from three-point range last season. You knew that wasn't going to be long-lasting, but you've also got a 6 assists per game guy on this roster as well, and Augustus Marasolinas, 6 assists, 14.5 points per game for a team that only shoots about 31% from three-point range. They're really looking to get the ball down low with Mitchell Saxon giving you about 7.5 or so rebounds per game, but still this is a team that they lose Ada Mahaney from a season ago. They're not quite as good with the likes of Jordan Ross and company being the main trigger man from the outside, and I do think that that's going to allow Boise State to be able to get the job done in this one. Both of these teams at their core are more slow defense-oriented style teams. I think that we're going to see that play out here. I set my total 135.5. I like the under, and I do like Boise State on the money line. 695, 696 on the betting board. Pepperdine is going to be playing against Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona does find themselves as 3.5 to 4-point underdogs, and your total on this game is between 143.5 to 144. And Northern Arizona, I set them as 1.5 point favorites. I do like them outright on the money line with this Northern Arizona unit. It's been very touch and go in terms of the backcourt with them, but you know what you're going to be able to get off Carson Tout, a double-double machine who at 6'7" is hauling in their 7+ rebounds per game. He's able to give you 3 assists per contest. Really love what he brings to the table for the team. And then Trent McLaughlin, you know what he's going to be able to provide in terms of just the sheer scoring. Now, in terms of facilitation, what have you, that's a little bit more up in the air, but He's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with 22.5 points per game, while Pepperdine has been very reliant upon Stefan Torvik. For Pepperdine, this bunch is coached up by Ed Schilling, who comes over from the East Coast and brought with him Zion Bethea, who's been able to give you 8 points per game. We're supposed to give this team a little bit more than 32.5% three-point shooting for a Pepperdine team that they were looking to play a bit more up-tempo. They've had to slow down their tempo just because they haven't necessarily been able to get the results that they've wanted from their main shooters, as Mo Odom has actually been able to dole out some clean offense. 7 assists, 11 points per game. He's shooting 38.5% from three-point range, but outside of he and Stefan Torvik, who's been able to give you 19 points, shooting 38% from three as a 6'8", little bit of a combo player. You don't have a ton with this team. You do have a guy down low that's giving you 7 boards per contest, and Babacar Coulibaly, who I like. He's been able to supply the team with 2 blocks per contest as well, but Pepperdine, with regards to their perimeter defense, it has been very lackadaisical. Now, they played against 2 D1 teams to be able to make their defensive numbers look a little bit better. I will say, overall for this Pepperdine team, the defense is coming along for the ride. If you count those non-D1 games, they have won 6 straight games with giving up 72 points or fewer, but this is also a Northern Arizona team that's really starting to find their offensive spark as well, 74-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. Oakland Fort, he's able to give you a bit from the outside. Has struggled a bit this year, but when you recall when the team made their run in the Big Sky Final 2 seasons ago in that tournament, he was a big part of that. He's only been able to give the team 7 points per contest, but while he's been struggling, Jaden Jackson has taken over the load, 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, only shooting about 31% from three-point range, but has also been able to give the team some nice facilitation with a few assists. I do think that for Northern Arizona, they find a way to get the job done. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game filling, and I do think that the Pepperdine ancillary scores get involved just a touch bit more, but I'm a little bit skeptical of that, so I did set my total 143.5 here at the 144. I'm in on the under, and I'm in on Northern Arizona right on the money line. 697, 698 on the betting board. It is BYU, and they play us Wyoming. Wyoming does find themselves as 18.5 point underdogs. So last game is 147.5, and with Wyoming, I did set them as 12.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to take the points for BYU. This team has been very much able to do a rock-solid job in terms of their offense, in terms of getting Igor Demeen going. We recall that rough night they had against Providence, but sans that, he's been able to do a nice job being able to pop it from three-point range, being able to give this team double figures, and his team should be able to do a nice job down low. But Wyoming has been a top 75 team with regards to rebound rate as well. You've got Jordan Nesbitt, who's able to give you 11 points, 10 rebounds per game. It's a Wyoming team that you know that they're going to be a little bit angry coming in on a losing streak, in which they've been losing all these games very close. Like, they have lost 3 straight games, all by 3 points or fewer, against relatively good competition, against Utah State, against Loyola Marymount. You're going to need this team to take care of the ball a little bit better, but Obi Ajabim, hopefully I said that correctly, 18 points per contest. He's been able to shoot 45% from 3-point range, 14 turnovers per game, have been a little bit less than savory, but Tuki Tanamo, he had 6'9", is able to stretch the floor. Last year at Denver was shooting much better than 23.5% from 3-point range, but he's able to give you that versatility. You've been able to get about 11 points per game out of Kobe Newton as well. And for BYU, top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but leave a little bit of something to be desired on defense against better competition. And by that I mean they have hosted a lot of teams that have been playing like the back-to-back between their venue and against Utah, and they get a lot of tired teams at elevation, and that has really been able to, shall we say, pad their defensive numbers. Fusani Traore, though, 7.5 boards, 12 points per game. Love what I'm seeing out of Richie Saunders as well. Has been able to shoot 40% from 3, 13.5 points per contest, but Kenyon Catchings, what are you going to be able to get out of him? This is a freshman that when he's on, he's on. When he's off, he's off. He's able to give you 10.5 points per game, but he's shooting just 30% from 3-point range. He's a little bit of a black hole in that every time you pass him the ball, he's probably not going to pass it back out, and has been shooting less than 50% at the free throw line, and this entire unit has been shooting about 67% at the charity stripe. This is a Wyoming team that's not shy of fouling, and it's a Wyoming team that has been able to hunker down a little bit more with their defense. 73 points or fewer allowed in 4 of their last 5 games, while this has been a BYU team that has been all over the place with regards to the way that their defense has been performing. So, semi-total 152.5. I do think that there's going to be a lot of open looks for both of these teams. Wyoming has been turning the ball over a little bit too much, but in terms of their three-point shooting defense, hasn't necessarily been there. BYU, I think that their defensive numbers, in terms of them being number 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, propped up by the competition that they played. So, looking at the over and the points in this ordeal. 699, 700 on the betting board. San Jose State is going to be playing us at Cal Poly. Cal Poly does find themselves as 5 to 5.5 point underdogs. Tonight's game, it is 155, seeing a 154.5 out there. there as well. For San Jose State, I did set them as favorites of 2.5 points. So at the 5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Cal Poly. We've already seen Cal Poly go on the road, knock off Stanford, and I feel like this has just been an undervalued team in general. Mike DeGeorge, who comes on over from D2 ranks over at Colorado Mesa, he's done an incredible job just getting great offense flowing with Cal Poly. Now for Cal Poly, they have been turning the ball over north of 14 times per game. They need to clean that up a little bit, but Owen Kuntz, 17 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You don't necessarily have that one main facilitator for Cal Poly, Jared Hyder. He's been able to give you about 3 assists per game, but each of your top 4 scorers and 5 out of your top 6 scorers all give you at least 2 assists per game. And then you've got additionally a guy that gives you 2.5 assists per contest, and Luka Tarlolik, he comes on over from Utah. He's been able to be a little bit more of a defensive, just more glue guy in general for this Cal Poly team. One that is outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but they've been able to hit their shots when they've been able to get some good, clean, flowing offense. And on the flip side, this has been a San Jose State team that they've just struggled a little bit with their offense as well. Donovan Yap, who comes on over from Fresno State, he's been able to give you 8.5 points, 3.5 assists per game for a team that they shoot 33.5% from 3. They're pretty much the opposite of Cal Poly. They're looking to play more slow and controlled. They turn the ball over just 10 times per contest. They shoot 78% at the free throw line. As a matter of fact, each of your top 3 scorers in Yap, Will McClendon, and Josh Udouche, they're all shooting at least 83% at the free throw line. Udouche and McClendon have been able to combine for about 31 points per game. You've got to combine 4 assists out of them as well, both shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but you do need to get a little bit more down low. Robert Viola is starting to come back into his own. Missed all of last year due to injury, 7 boards, a block and a half per contest, and Saradine Nana has been able to give you about 4 boards, shooting 40% from 3-point range as well. But Day Hall, who comes on over from Stephen F. Austin, he's the X factor. He was a top scorer for them 2 seasons ago with about 13 points per contest, just 6.5 points per game on 25% 3-point shooting thus far this season. That's been a little bit underwhelming. I think the Cal Poly is going to be able to find a way to hang in there, and Cal Poly has just had the innate ability to be able to speed things up. Now, they've given up at least 77 points each of their last 5 games, and you've noticed the San Jose State team cranking up their offense as well. At least 77 points scored in each of their last 3 games. So, interesting with regards to total perspective. I set my total at 154, and I think we've just went a hair too far at the 155. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Cal Poly. 701, 702 on the betting board. UC Davis is on the road against Sacramento State. Sacramento State, a 6.5 to a 7.5 point underdog. Your total on this game, it is between 137 to 137.5, and with UC Davis, I did set them as a road favorite of 6.5 points. Being able to get 7+, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Sacramento State. Sacramento State back to playing well outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Now for Sacramento State, they do need to hunker down a little bit more on defense because you can't play that slowly and be outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that's where they are at right now. But for UC Davis, it is all about having that main guy, Ty Johnson, being able to just supply for this team. 21.5 points per contest. He's been able to give you about 5 boards, 3 steals, but you just don't have a lot around him. And for UC Davis, very careless with the ball. Honestly, both of these teams are outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Sacramento State, north of 14 turnovers per game. UC Davis, 15.3 turnovers per game. Now, for UC Davis, they do a much better job of being able to generate turnovers, as you've got Leo DeBrule, who gives you a steal, 11 points per game. Probably shooting 48.5% from 3-point range, but outside of him, you really don't have anyone else other than Mr. Sevilla, Connor Sevilla, who shoots above 33% from 3-point range. Connor Sevilla, about 9.5 points per contest, shooting 39.5% from 3-point range. And then Niko Dokac, down low, 7.5 rebounds per game. UC Davis, much improved down low, but that said, with Jacob Holt, he's been able to, for Sacramento State, be a bit of a do-it-all guy in the post. 6 boards, 16 points per game, while shooting 41% from 3-point range. You're really lacking that main guy in terms of being able to pop it from 3-point range in terms of a guard, but Bailey Nunn has taken over the point guard duties and has done a good job with it for the Sacramento State team. 5.5 points, 3.5 assists per game. He's been able to give the team 3+ assists in 3 of the last 4 games, and has become a little bit more of an assertive scorer. He's done a good job keeping things clean with 2 turnovers or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games. Also is expecting much more out of Jalen Petrie. For Petrie, comes on over from Pepperdine, where he was averaging about 4 to 5 points per contest, just 2.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. Hasn't necessarily given you a ton there. And this is a Sacramento State team that overall, they're shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range. EJ Neal has been able to give you 9 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Do you think that Sacramento State does just enough on their own floor to hang in there against a UC Davis team that, while they've been able to play some relatively solid defense recently, the turnovers have been an issue for them? So I'm going to be willing to take those points and set my total at 132.5. I think they get a low possession game, so in on the under. 703, 704 on the betting board. It is UC Santa Barbara playing against UW Green Bay, and UW Green Bay is a underdog of 13 points. You're seeing a 13.5 out there as well. Total on this game between 151 to 151.5. wrote this game up with UW Green Bay, an 18.5 point underdog on my handicap. I am willing to lay with UC Santa Barbara. I wrote that up with UW Green Bay, just a dumpster fire on defense outside the top 330. Turns out points allowed on a per possession basis, and who knows what you're going to get in terms of rotation. We saw Anthony Roy, the top scorer in all of college basketball, 2 games ago get benched, and when he returned in the previous game for the team against UW Milwaukee, scored 20 points in a 20-point loss. Other than Marcus Hall was able to give you 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoot 38% from 3-point range. Nobody else on the roster gives you north of 7.5 points per game. You really don't have anyone outside Roy that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Team has turned the ball over 13 times per contest. They're playing fast, but they're playing out of control. Meanwhile, for UC Santa Barbara, it's been touch and go for them, as well as their defense over the last 5 games has given up 79, 51, 48, 84, and 71 points. So, it's been very much the best of times than the worst of times, and we've seen Santa Barbara over the last few years actually be less efficient at home rather than on the road. Do think that that's going to turn around a little bit here with Stephon Swinson coming over from the Atlantic Sun, giving you 4 assists, 12 points per game, shooting north of 45% from 3-point range. As a collective, Santa Barbara is shooting 39% from 3. They get out of sorts with it. They've been turning the ball over 13 times per game. But fortunately for them, UW Green Bay has not been doing the world's greatest job of being able to generate those turnovers. It's a Santa Barbara team that typically they're looking to play a little bit more slowly, and they're back right in that vector, 291st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got this UW Green Bay team that's about 127th, but feels like they play a whole heck of a lot faster with the amount of points that they surrender. Meanwhile, you've got also a guy that's able to shoot it really well from 3-point range at 48.5% despite just 7 points per game in Cole Anderson, who's still a nice weapon for the Santa Barbara team. And Cullen Smith, after missing 3 games, he's back. Vanderbilt transfer, that same 6'8", he's able to pop it at a 39% clip, 8 points per game. Do you think that Kenny Poto wins the battle down low? And for UW Green Bay, having to travel out west with Doug Gottlieb still having to do his radio show, that's not necessarily a great combination either. So it's a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay it with Santa Barbara, set them as an 18.5 point favorite. Set my total 154.5. I'm in on the over. And this last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit a break in the extra games, 7-5, 7-6, UNLV and Pacific do battle. Pacific, a 12.5 point underdog. It's all this game between 139.5 to a 140.5. I think that this was supposed to be from Lee's Family Forum. I'm seeing mixed results as whether or not this is going to be at the Thomas and Mag Center or Lee's Family Forum, but that said, UNLV is pretty much having a home game here regardless, and I did set them as a 14.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it for Pacific. It's just been specifically tough for the team to be able to get some clean flowing offense as they bring in Dave Smart, who is a longtime coach actually out in the country of Canada, and he's been able to give this team a little bit of a spark because Pacific was the worst against the spread team 2 out of the last 3 years in all of college basketball, with Elias Randolph being able to supply 17 points, 8 rebounds per game. He was actually one of the better Canadian college basketball players out there last season, but he brings with him as well, because he was an assistant coach over at Texas Tech, Elijah Fisher, Lamar Washington, the main portion of this backcourt, combined for 28 points per game. Washington, 6.5 assists per game, but also 3.5 turnovers per game. Team just has not been able to knock down threes, shooting 29% from the outside. They go up against a UNLV team that, when they're at their best, they are able to do a good job generating turnovers. They've been an above-average team with that regard, and for Dedrin Thomas, he has been the main headliner for this team. 3.5 assists, 17 points per game, shooting 45.5% from 3. UNLV keeping it relatively clean with about 10.5 turnovers per game, shooting 37% from the outside, but they do need to get a little bit more down low. Other than Jeremiah Cherry, who's giving you 6.5 rebounds per game, nobody else really gives you north of 4.5 boards per contest. Jalen Hill was a starter 2 seasons ago over at Oklahoma, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2 steals, 2.5 assists per game. So he does a little bit of everything. Doesn't necessarily do one thing great, but does a little bit of everything. And with regards to UNLV defense, from 3-point range, they have really been giving it up. They are allowing opponents to shoot right now about 38.5% from 3-point range. I think a little bit of it has been bad shooting variance, but certainly they've left a lot to be desired there. In terms of their 2-point shooting defense, it has been significantly better, and this is a Pacific team that is a top 125 team with regards to rebound rate, but they really don't put opponents under duress. They're about 328th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so I do think that we get a little bit of a higher scoring game with UNLV just not really doing a great job of being able to guard the arc, but I do think that in the end for Pacific, they're just not going to have enough in the backcourt to be able to match up with what UNLV has around Dedrin Thomas. You've got Julian Swain along with Jalen Bedford, pair of guys, everything combined about 19 points per contest, both shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. I do think those threes get you over the total, and the UNLV versatility gets the job done on the spread. Set my line at 14.5, so one to lay with UNLV, and I'm in on this total over. And now we will take our final break and then hit the extra games right here on Texas A&M with myself, Xavier Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast. back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast Soups with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've gone through the normal betting board with regards to all these games for today. Now, how about if we waste no more time, and there's still plenty of money to be made on these smaller games, let's hit the extra games board and head into the bonus.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-555, 306-556. Long Island is on the road against Missouri. Missouri is a 27 to a 27.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 147, and I set this line at 24.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Long Island. A little bit of a better defensive effort for this team. Well, still outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you can tell that Gerald Gillian, the new assistant for Long Island, has been able to preach a little bit of toughness for this team. They've got a nice go-to scorer, Malachi Davis, as well. For Malachi Davis, he's been able to supply the team with 17.5 points per game, was over at Arizona State a season ago, and has really been able to uplift this team for Missouri. They've been able to do a better job on the glass this season, but still leave a little bit of something to be desired there. They bring in Mark Mitchell from Duke, 13 points, about 5 boards, not shooting a ball from three-point range, but overall it is a Missouri team that does rank in the top 35 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. We've seen what they've been able to do at home. One of the more dramatic teams in terms of their home and road splits, mainly because of the competition that they played, but we saw them take down Kansas over the weekend last week. I do think that might cause for a little bit of a sleepy spot here. You've been able to have a few guys in the backcourt step up, like Tamar Bates, be able to give you 14 points, shooting high 30s from three-point range. Caleb Grills already missed a few games this season, and is probably going to be out the full once again, as he was not out there for that Kansas game, was actually shooting 55% from three-point range before going down with injury. But you still been able to have someone like Mr. Robinson and Anthony Robinson give you about 12 points per contest. He's been able to do a nice job for a Missouri team that has also been able to do a good job of being able to generate turnovers as well. This is a Long Island team that, with their offense, it's much more clean than it was in past years, but they're still turning the ball over about 12 times per game. Having Brent Davis out has been hurting them, but you've had Terrell Strickland give the team good versatility, 5 boards, 5 assists, 9 points per game. I think that should be just enough for Long Island to hold in this game, and Long Island has really been slowing down their tempo in regulation, and regulation only. This team has given up 70 points or fewer each of their last 4 games, so I do think that they find a way to hold in here. I do think that Missouri is still going to be able to get some nice, clean, flowing offense. So semi-total 152.5. I'm in on the over, and I'm going to take the points with Long Island. 306-557, 306-558. South Carolina State is on the road against Furman. Furman is a 12 to 12.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 141.5 to a 142. I set Furman as a 13.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to lay it. Now, I know that if you look at the shot quality numbers, Furman has been one of the bigger outliers in college basketball thus far this season with their 9-1 start. But with South Carolina State, it's an interesting team. They do hockey-style line shifts. They pretty much go 11 deep, with Drayton Jones being their main low-post presence, 15.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Also still gives you a steal and a block per game as well for South Carolina State. They just don't have that main facilitator in the backcourt. They found it a little bit more with Mitchell Taylor, give you about 2.5 assists per game. And then you've also got 6.5 points per contest out of Michael Teal, who's been able to throw in there about 2.3 or so assists per contest. So these guys in tandem have been able to do a good job of being able to dish out the ball a little bit. And this is a team that they do generate quite a few turnovers as well, but this is also a Furman unit that's shooting 37% from 3 with PJ Smith, 18 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, shooting 48% from 3-point. You've been able to get 43% 3-point shooting of Charles Johnson. He's come up from the non-D1 ranks, and he's been able to supply the team with about 7 to 7.5 points per game. It's a Furman unit that has been able to do a little bit better job on the glass, as Garrett Hine along with Cooper Bowser have been able to supply the team with a combined about 11 rebounds per game, but Hine gives you 3 assists per game. Very unselfish team with Nick Anderson, the gentleman that comes up from the D2 ranks, 3 assists, 10 points per game. He's shooting 39.5% from 3-point. This has been a South Carolina State unit that's also had a tough time holding on to the ball outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Defense has been getting a little bit better, but still, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, about 169th. And for Furman, they've actually slowed down their tempo this year. They're playing a little bit more, I guess you could say, of a concerted effort to be able to hold teams down on defense within the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Even with that, though, I did set my total at a 143.5. I think that you get just enough 3-point shooting out of this Furman team to go over. I do think that they take it to a South Carolina State team looking for their identity in the backcourt. So, going to be willing to lay up to a 13 with Furman, and in on this total over. 306-559, 306-560. It is Penn State, and they play us Coppin St. Coppin State does find themselves as very sizable underdogs of 38.5 points. So, on this game, between 144.5 to a 145. I'm in on the under because you've got a Coppin State team that's in the bottom 3 nationally in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Coppin State actually a really good effort a few nights ago, losing by just 7 points against NC State, but Even with that, I'm going to be willing to lay with Penn State. I'm willing to lay up to 40 with them. For Coppin State, this team is just completely rudderless in the backcourt. Julius Ellerby, who comes on over from Eastern Michigan, he's been the top guy for this team. About 9 points, 5 boards, shooting 23.5% from three for a team that, as a whole, they shoot 24.5% from three, 65.5% on the free throw line. And despite being outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, they have been turning the ball over 13.5 times per game. Their top scorer this season in Darius Ward is currently out. Ellerby, he's questionable for this game as well. He might be missing as well. So you've got just a lot of attrition. You've got nobody that's able to dole out the ball for the team. They're looking now to Cameron Brown to be able to give the team a little bit more in the backcourt. A non-D1 transfer is giving you about 4 points per contest. It's really brutal there. And for Penn State, this is one of the best teams at generating turnovers in all of college basketball. They shoot as a collective 38.5% for three-point range, with Ace Baldwin along with Zachary Hicks being able to combine for 28 points per contest. Baldwin, 8 assists. He does give out about 4 turnovers per game, but this is a Coppin State team that they don't necessarily do a great job of being able to generate turnovers. 6 different guys for this Penn State team are generating north of 10 points per contest. Puff Johnson, Francis De Leon, these two guys have both been able to give you about 10 to 10.5 points per game. Have been great there in terms of their three-point shooting, but that's why you've got other guys on the roster to be able to do so, like a Damian Dunn, who's been able to get her done, shooting 39% for three, and Yannick Niederhauser coming over from Northern Illinois, being able to give you a little bit over a block and a half, 6 rebounds per game. He should be able to win the battle down low against a Coppin State team that they've got Prince Orduro, who comes over from George Mason. He's been able to give you about 4 to 5 rebounds per game, but for Coppin State, they have not gone past a 57-point plateau in each of their last 5 games. You've got a Penn State team that I think a lot of people would be surprised to know pretty solid with their defense. 70 points or fewer surrendered in 3 of their last 5 games. So I do like the under in the spot. I just don't think that Coppin State gets past 60. And with Penn State, I'm willing to lay up to 40 with them. 306-561, 306-562. Lamar is going to be on the road against Louisiana. Louisiana just find themselves as 2 to 2.5 point favorites out on this game. Is 146 after a 147. Louisiana finally got their first cover of the year a few nights ago against Southeast Louisiana. I think this will be number 2. I'm willing to lay up to 4 points with them. With Lamar, this team is in so much transition from where they were a season ago, and they're going to need BB Knight to be able to step up. Who last year he was a relatively nice facilitator for them, and Jashawn Jackson, who's come in from UT Rio Grande Valley, has done a good job being able to give this team some nice solid offense. 13 points, 4.5 assists per game. Team has turned the ball over about 13 times per contest, and they've got Adam Hamilton along with Andrew Holyfield combining for just under 12 rebounds per game, but you're going to need to get a bit more out of the backcourt as your main guy with 16.5 points per game, Alexis Marmayoles. He's been shooting about 37.5% from 3, but hasn't necessarily been able to help out in terms of the facilitation side of things. And for Louisiana, they're looking for that trigger man as well. Kentrell Garnett has been averaging 2.5 assists per game after he last season was more of an off-the-ball scorer that was able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. He's been helped out a little bit down low by Karen Ratliff, giving the team about 4.5 rebounds per game, but Lamar should outgun them down low, where Louisiana has the advantage is that they've been able to generate about 8 steals per contest. They've done a nice job with Christian Wright, who was over at Oregon State and Georgia to begin his career, being able to supply this team now with about 11 points per game. He's been able to give out a little bit more facilitation as well. Does need to cut down on the fact that he's had 3+ turnovers in 4 of the last 5 games, but this is not a Lamar team that has been able to do a great job of being able to pluck out those turnovers. And additionally, you've had Kendall Davis step up in a big way, give the team 7.5 points, multiple assists, 4 boards per contest, being that nice stat sheet suffer that they need. And I do think that Louisiana finds just enough to be able to get the job done. Along with that, Zeke Cook should be able to give you a little bit more down low after over at Jackson State last year. He was supplying the team with north of 5 rebounds per game. Do you think that this turns into an up and down game? Semi-total 150. Both of these teams have had a very brutal time in terms of guarding the 3-point line, especially Louisiana was number 1 with that regard a season ago. So negative regression, certainly taking hold there. I'm going to be in on this total over, and I'm willing to lay with Louisiana. 306-563, 306-564. Canisius plays host to Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine. They're a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite. Total on this game between 137 to 137.5. With Maine, I set them at a 7.5. So 8+, that is going to be my buy point on Canisius. Now for Canisius, it's been all sorts of brutal for them thus far this season, but even in their winless run, they've been able to get good production out of Paul McMillan, who's been able to supply the team with 19 points per game, and Tana Copa has been able to give the team a little bit more in terms of the backcourt as well, shooting 36.5% from 3, 12 points. These guys are really not doing the best job on the glass. Cam Polisi is the only guy in the roster that's giving you north of 3.5 rebounds per game, 6.5 points, right around about 5.5 or so rebounds per game, but the team does shoot 81% of the free throw line. They go up against a Maine team that they themselves have been well outside the top 225 in terms of their rebound rate. Now, Maine is doing a nice job defensively, top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up 66 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, with Keon Burns being able to give you a bit more down low. You should be the main guy in terms of posting this game, 13 points, 6 boards for this Maine team. And for Maine, they've got a player that led all of college basketball in terms of steals per game 2 seasons ago in Kellen Tynes, and he's picking up right where he left off. 12 points, 3 steals, 4.5 assists per game, and then AJ Lopez, this man will give you 14 points per game, shooting 42% from the outside, but much like Canisius, this team hasn't been able to shoot it well from 3, but they do shoot it well at the free throw line. They shoot 81.5% of the charity stripe, 30.5% from 3-point range. Maine does a little bit of a better job of being able to take care of the ball, but these 2 teams I think are going to be really struggling with their offense. I do think that with Maine not necessarily having a ton down low, it's going to allow for this Canisius team to be able to hold within the number. I did set my total at a 135.5. I think that things are going to be very sloppy for both of these offenses. I do like the under. I like at A+ Canisius with the points. 306.565, 306.566. South Carolina plays us a USC Upstate. Upstate is a 25-point underdog. Total this game between 149.5 to a 150, and with Upstate, I set them as 19.5-point underdogs. I'm going to be one to take the points. South Carolina has proven that they aren't as bad as that team that night number 1 took that loss to North Florida, but still, it's been a little bit shaky for them. Colin Murray Boyle's going to be the best player in this game. He's been able to supply the South Carolina team down low with about 16 points, 9 boards, a block, a steal per contest. And Jabari Thomas is starting to come along for the ride in the backcourt. Was a top flight scorer over at Norfolk State 8 seasons ago. He's now been able to give the team about 12.5 points per game, shooting 40% from 3-point range. But it's all about Mr. Dean. His first name is Mr., his last name is Dean, and he's supplied the team with 15 points, 2 steals, 5.5 rebounds per game. Leaves a lot to be desired in terms of his outside shooting, but Marty Richter comes on over from Drake, has been able to do a nice job assembling this backcourt. Need to get a little bit more in sorts with regards to taking care of the ball, 14.5 turnovers per game, but they go up against the South Carolina team that's below the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You've gotten about 11 points, 4 assists per game out of Kamani Gregory, who stepped into the point guard role very nicely. Need a bit more in terms of outside shooting, but got 37.5% 3-point shooting, 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game out of Carmelo Adkins as well. And I do think that for USC Upstate, even though they're going to be completely outgunned down low, I do think that their backcourt going to be able to keep them lively against a South Carolina team that they really don't turn the ball over all a lot. Their offense has been able to ascend quite a bit recently, 70-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games, but with their slow and controlled style, I think that's going to be very difficult for them to cover this number, though. I do like this total over because you've got a USC Upstate team that's looking to play up-tempo. For USC Upstate, defense has been a bit better, 74 points of fear allowed in 4 of their last 5 games, but certainly a team that is going to give it up from the interior, and I do think that Colin Murray Boyles has a big game, so willing to take the points with Upstate, set them as a 19.5-point dog, and I'm in on the over. 306.567, 306.568. It is Dartmouth on the road against UMass Lowell. Lowell does find themselves as 11 to 11.5-point favorites on this game between 153.5 to a 154. And with UMass Lowell, I did set them as 11.5-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay the 11 with them. Dartmouth has looked much better this year. Ryan Cornish last year was giving the team less than 8 points per contest. You knew that he just wasn't right or something like that because he's returned much more to form this season, averaging about 13 to 14 points per contest, giving you some nice versatility with 3 assists per game. And then Jackson Monroe has been able to do a solid job down low with about 5.5 boards, 10.5 points per game, but for this UMass Lowell team, when they've been at full force, they've been a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Always a rock solid team at being able to guard the 3-point line, and now they themselves are shooting 37.5% from the outside. It's a team that's looking to play up tempo. They're a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. You've been able to have a duo of Yuri Covington along with Martin Somerville off the ball, be able to give you about 25.5 points per game, and then Quincy Mincy, he does it all, 17 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, shooting 37% from 3-point range. Now for UMass Lowell, they need to reel it in terms of the north of 15 turnovers per game, but they face off against the Dartmouth team that, while they're doing a better job of generating turnovers this year, it's not necessarily their forte. It's interesting with regards to total, as I set mine at a 153.5. I'm in on the under for this Dartmouth unit. They've been able to do a much better job defensively recently, but they've also cranked up their tempo a little bit more than what it was a season ago, and a season ago Dartmouth was outside the top 350 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not necessarily amazing from 3, but now shooting 32.5% from 3 with Brandon Mitchell-Day. Give you 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but X factor here for UMass Lowell, one of the top rebound rate teams in all of college basketball last season. Max Brooks, who's been able to give you 8 boards, 14 points, about 2.5 blocks per game, a 2-time All-AEC defensive conference player. I think that he's going to be able to win out here, and that'll allow UMass Lowell to get the job done. I'm willing to lay up to 11 with UMass Lowell, and I did take my total under, as I said, my total at a 153.5, 365.69, 365.70. UNC Asheville is going to be playing us to Western Carolina. Western Carolina is a underdog of 9 points, and your total on this game between 145 to 146, and with Western Carolina, made them a 10.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with Asheville, even though Asheville does lose their main guys down low, Drew Pembroke along with Nicholas McMillan. They bring back a lot of the good backcourt that we were seeing from a season ago, and for Western Carolina, you just really don't have any of that. As of right now, they lose pretty much everyone that averaged more than 2 points per game from a season ago. Ice Emery, the gentleman from Wisconsin, has been rock solid. He's been able to give you about 13 points, throws in there a steal and a half per contest as well. And then you've been able to have guys down low like Bernard Polite, Miles Kell, be able to supply the team with a combined 12 rebounds per game. But the team is shooting 32.5% from three, and they're outside the top 345 in terms of ball security. Turn the ball over 17.5 times per game. Face off against an Asheville team that's okay at generating turnovers. About 7.5 steals per game. I like what you're getting in the backcourt as Joshua Banks along with Fletcher Abey. They've combined for 27 points per contest, both shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but also getting a bit more down low as well. Toya Solomon, he's been able to supply the team with about 7.5 or so rebounds per game for Josh Banks. Was dealing with a little bit of an ailment, but seems like he should be all good to go here. He was able to appear in their game against George Mason about a week and a half ago, and then they played against two non-D1 teams. Felt like those absences were a little bit more, shall we say, precautionary rather than anything else. And then additionally, if you don't have him out there on the floor, you've got someone like Cameron Taylor, who as a freshman has really stepped up for this team with 4.5 boards, 7 points per game. Really doesn't give you a lot from the outside, but he's able to D up. He's able to give you something with regards to the post play. And the team as a collective is shooting 36% from three-point against a Western Carolina team that has been able to do an okay job of being able to defend and be able to guard the three-point line, but still leaving something to be desired there, as they're, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, more around 222nd. I do think that UNC Asheville, ever since that opening night last against Alabama, has been able to really, shall we say, bulk up with regards to their defense. Going to be able to hold up here. So, circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with UNC Asheville. Semi-total 146.5, so also in on the over. 306.571, 306.572. High point hopes to not be a low point. They are playing against Appalachian State. This is from Novant Health Fieldhouse. So, neutral court game with High Point being a 5.5 to a 6 point favorite. Totals between 137 to a 138. I made High Point a 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the 6+ here with Appalachian State. This is a game out there in Greensboro, North Carolina, so for both of these teams, a relatively neutral court. And for High Point, I think that they're just going to struggle with CJ Hunley and all that he's able to provide for the team. At 6'11", has always been a mid-30s three-point shooter, down to about 30% this year, but been able to give the team 14.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Biggest thing for Appalachian State first few games of the season is that the backcourt wasn't quite a bit of transition, but Miles State has done a nice job of being able to steady the ship. 12.5 points, 5 assists, 2 steals per game for an Appalachian State team that they're typically a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. They're shooting just 61% at the free throw line, but after their defense really struggled first few games of the season, getting bludgeoned by a bunch of, shall we say, power conference teams, they're back in the top 180 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And with this High Point team, last year they were a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're a little down from that, but they still do have Jocelyn Bodu, who should be able to win the battle down low. He hasn't been as effective as the season ago, but 7 boards per contest, just 4.5 points per game though. And then you have in the backcourt Demarion Williams along Kezigifa combining for 31 points, 5.5 assists per game, and Williams is right now shooting 46% from three. Overall, High Point shoots 37% from three-point range. This is even with Abdoulaye Thiam really struggling, just 6 points per contest, shooting just 22% from three-point range, but now reinforcements have arrived for the team. Bobby Pettiford, who began his career over at Kansas along with East Carolina, he's been able to find his footing, being able to supply the team with 4+ assists per game in 3 out of the last 4 contests, really not turning the ball over like a lot. He missed the first 5 games of the season, so that's been big for them. And then the big question mark becomes with High Point, what are you going to be able to get moving forward out of Chase Johnson? He announced himself very quickly. He had like 29 points in the first game of the season, actually 31 points in the first game of the season, has not scored more than 9 since then, so that's been a little bit mysterious for this High Point team that overall does shoot about 37% from three-point range, but Appalachian State, they've really been able to ratchet up on defense, giving up 63 points for 4 and 3 of the last 4 games. They've really done a nice job slowing down their games. It's a High Point team that they themselves have been looking a little bit better on the defensive front. With this being a neutral court game, I did set my total at just a 135.5, so I'm in on the under and at 6+, taking those points with Appalachian State. 306.573, 306.574. Longwood is playing out NC Central. NC Central is an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 144 to a 145. 145, and with Longwood, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. So you're at 8+. I'm going to be taking those points with NC Central. We'll recognize that for NC Central thus far this season, they're outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do have faith in Lavelle Moten, who was once the AAU coach of one John Wall, to be able to pick things up and be able to find a way against a Longwood team that is going to be able to dominate down low. This NC Central unit does not have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. And even though Longwood doesn't necessarily have that main rebounder, you saw Michael Crispus, who season ago he was giving the team 6+ boards per contest. That's been down to about 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And it's a Longwood team that's shooting just 29.5% from 3-point range. But you've got Cooper Garland in the backcourt who's able to give you 4+ assists per game. Yuan Nazimi, he's a 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, about 9 points, 4 boards per contest. Kyrell Luch in the backcourt comes on over from St. Bonaventure and Holy Cross. He's been able to give out about 2.5 assists per game. And that has been a Longwood team, though, that it's been a long time since they've been necessarily a great 3-point shooting team. They're shooting less than 30% from the outside. And then you've got Po Boy King on the flip side for NC Central, who's been able to supply the team with 16 points per game. And even though Longwood should be able to win that battle down low, you're starting to get a little bit more as well out of Perry Smith Jr., 6'9" combo player, 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. So he's been able to do a nice job there, generating nearly a steal per game. And that's really the name of the game for NC Central and their defense. They need to be able to generate turnovers. They themselves take pretty good care of the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 11.5 times per game, and they're shooting now about 33.5% from 3-point. You got a 40% 3-point shooter in Keyshawn Porter, who's been able to step in, give the team 10 points per contest. He's really been able to build off of what he was able to do a season ago now. He's coming off of a 0-point stinker against West Virginia, but I do think that for this NC Central team, they're starting to find their bearings a little bit more on defense. I do think that they're going to be able to generate enough turnovers against this Longwood backcourt that has been a little bit shaky this year to be able to hold in there. I feel like the 8 has just went a bit too far, even though NC Central has had their woes with regards to their front court. So I'm going to be willing to take the 8+ here with NC Central. Did set my total at a 144.5. So here at the 145, would rather have the 145 under rather than the 144 over with the way that the Longwood has failed to hit 3. So looking at the under and looking at the points. 36.575, 36.576. It is Queens NC on the road against Gardner-Webb. Gardner-Webb a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite. Total on this game, going to be getting that at a 155.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under for Queens NC, not playing quite as up-tempo as they have the past few years. Now, Queens NC is also a top 200 team now in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. With Gardner-Webb, it's been a little bit hit or miss what they've been able to get on the offensive side of things. Gardner-Webb is looking very much to control the interior. Meanwhile, Queens NC is looking to play a little bit more through the outside, but I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay with Gardner-Webb. With Queens NC, they have to replace pretty much 3 of their top 4 scorers from the season ago, and they've had a very difficult time of being able to do so. Meanwhile, for Gardner-Webb, even though they underwent a coaching regime change in the offseason, they stayed in-house with Jeremy Luther, and he's been able to bring back a lot of the guys that had transferred out of the program previously, like Anthony Selden. 2 seasons ago, he was a nice double-figure scorer for the team. Left last year for Rice. He's back. He's been able to give them 17 points per contest. So the familiarity has really been there with these transfers. Jermaine Mann began his career at Gardner-Webb. He's back for a second time. He's been able to give the team 10.5 points per contest. You've been able to get 7.5 rebounds, a little bit over a block per contest out of Isaiah Richards as well. Like what I'm seeing there, and you just don't have as much in the interior with regards to this Queens NC team, who does have Malcolm Wilson, who's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. And I do like me some Cash, as you've got Bryce Cash, who's been able to give you 6 points, 3.5 assists per game, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury here in the early part of the season. Has already missed a game as a result of it. Caleb Asbury has been able to give you 11.5 points per game, and it's a Queens NC team that's just not shooting the same from the outside as they did a season ago. 13.5 turnovers per game, shooting 31% from 3, and very concerning. 59% at the free throw line. That is not something that you'd like to see. Leo Camario has been able to give you about 4.5 boards per contest, and Jackson Pollard stepped in. He's been able to give the team 8 points, right around about 5 rebounds per game after being a part-time starter last season. But that said, with Queens NC, don't think that they're going to do a great job of matching up down low, and the backcourt has been leaving a lot to be desired, as well as not doing a good job of being able to take care of the little things. So this is a game where I'm going to be looking at the under. This is a Queens NC team that just hasn't been able to play as up-tempo as they did a season ago. So in on that under, and I'm willing to lay up to 8.5 with Gardner-Webb. 36.577, 36.578. It is Fordham playing against Bryant. This is from Mohegan Sun. So neutral court game with Fordham being a 1.5 to 1 point favorite. It's on this game between 159 to 159.5, and I did set Fordham as a 3-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take Bryant outright on the money line for Fordham, even though they do bring in a nice go-to scorer that's been able to do a nice job at Jackie Johnson, supplying the team with 17-plus points per contest. I just think that the completeness of Bryant is going to be able to win out. As for Fordham, you saw Romad Dean along with Abdul Simbilia giving you about 10.5 or so rebounds per game, but Earl Timberlake, I think, wins that battle on the glass. He is bringing sexy back with 15 points, 7.5 boards, 4.5 assists per game. Not a guy that's going to light it up from three-point range, but that's why you've got someone like a Rafael Pinzon who's been able to give you 19 points per game. With Bryant, they've always had a lot of good top-flight transfers that have come into the program, but now they're finally giving these guys some minutes. Now you're giving Kevon Kramer the chance to score 7.5 points per game. Keyshawn Mitchell has stepped in at 6'11". He's been able to give the team about 8.5 points per game after he was an afterthought a season ago, and Barry Evans, who steps in from St. Bonaventure, is able to supply this team with about 7.5 rebounds per game. And Bryant is now shooting 38% from three-point. Just as a Bryant team that is not shy to run up tempo. They're a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. And Fordham has always been a team that has been looking to gun it as well. For Fordham, they're a top 150 team in terms of total possessions per game. So both of these teams, even though they play fast, they're a little bit more, I guess you call them, defensively oriented with regards to their quick pace. But with regards to this Bryant team, they over the last 2 seasons have been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you got a Fordham team that's been very, shall we say, lax with regards to perimeter defense. You got Yusuf Metter is back. He's been able to give the team about 10 points per contest, which has been very encouraging, but hasn't necessarily translated to the defensive side of things. They're 296th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. You've been able to have Joshua Rivera supply the team with 9 points per contest after coming in from the Patriot League, but team as a whole, they shoot 34% from three-point range. You've been able to get really good production when he's been out there out of Jameer Tripp, who has missed 4 games this season, but he's been able to shoot 47% from three-point range. He'll be all good to go in this one. It's given the team 9+ points at each of the last 5 games, but don't think that that's going to be enough in this case. Do think that you get a high possession game, but do think that you get a little bit more of a defense-oriented game. Set by total 153. I'm in on the under, and I do like Bryant outright on the money line. 36.579, 36.580. It is Howard, and they play UNC Wilmington. Wilmington does find themselves as 4.5 point favorites. Out on skim between 144 to a 145, and with Wilmington, set them as just 2.5 point favorites. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Howard. For Howard, this was a team that was looking for a little bit more than what they've gotten down low, but for this UNC Wilmington team, they have not been able to utilize the 7-footer that they brought in via the transfer portal, Harlan Obiana, in my opinion, enough. I do think that Howard is going to be able to match up quite well in the backcourt. They've got a nice top-flight guy, and Blake Harper has been able to give the team 16.5 points per game. For Howard, they need to really do a better job of taking care of the ball, 15 turnovers per game, but when they get off those threes, they hit them. They're shooting 39% from the outside. Marcel Dockery has been able to give the team 16 points per game. And then additionally with Bryce Harris, he has been, when he's been out there on the floor, a nice difference maker, 9.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. I expect him to be out once again, though. He's missed each of the last 4 games, so that means a little bit more on the plate of Cameron Chockley Okeke, who comes over from the Ivy League. He's been able to shoot 43.5% from 3, 6.5 points per game, and he's coming off of 21 points and 12 rebounds in the team's most recent game as well. So, like the way that he's been developing, he's been seeing more minutes with the Harris injury. And then on the flip side, you've got a unit that has been looking at Donovan Newby to do it all in the backcourt. Newby has been able to give the team 17 points per game for a big portion of his career, was just a one-trick pony 3-point shooter. Now he's able to give the team about 3.5 assists per game. Has really been able to give a little bit more of a complete game. But again, where you're able to hit this Howard team hard is down low. And right now for UNC Wilmington, you've only got one guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, as you've got Noah Ross being able to supply the team with 7.5 rebounds per game. But the problem with that is that he's been dealing with injury ever since late November. So that means that this team has been a little bit rough on the glass. You've been able to have Joshua Corbin be able to give you 7.5 points per game after he was a nice double-figure score over at Robert Morris last season. But for UNC Wilmington, even though they've been getting the job done recently, it's been much more through their backcourt rather than on the interior. You've got a Howard team that has now given up 79+ points at each of their last 4 games against D1 opponents. UNC Wilmington has given up 72 points for fear in pretty much each of their last 5. Good old situation of something's got to give. I think that Howard is going to get the tempo cranked up just a little bit more and win that battle in the backcourt to hold in this game. I set my line at 2.5, so going to be willing to take the points with Howard, and I do like this total over. 3.6581, 3.6582. California is going to be playing us at Northwestern St. Northwestern St is a 15 to 14.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 144 to 144.5, and I did set my line at 14.5. So here at a 15, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Northwestern State. For Cal, this defense just really needs to do a little bit of a better job and getting back Javon Blackshear is a big help for this team as he comes over from Grand Canyon, 4 assists, 14.5 points per game, was missing for 3 or 4 games earlier in the season, and he's been able to give this team just a little bit more steady in the backcourt, but that really hasn't translated in terms of defense being able to ascend as Cal has really given it up from 3-point range as they are 306th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and more shockingly, they're allowing opponents to shoot only about 29 to 30% from 3-point range on the road. At home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 39% from 3-point range. So that's been a bit of an issue for a team that overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 242nd in all of college basketball, going up against a Northwestern St unit that is actually in the top 215 with this regard. Northwestern St has actually really been looking to slow down their play as well. They've been playing a lot through the former top 100 transfer in Addison Patterson. At 6'7", he's been a nice versatile piece, 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. Was dealing with a little bit of an injury throughout the beginning part of the season, but should be all back and good to go in this one, while John Sanders, who comes over from Coastal Carolina, he's been able to shoot 43% from 3-point range, giving the team 13.5 points per game. Micah Thomas, who's over from Nichols, he's been able to give the team a bit more in the backcourt as well, as he gives you an assist and a half, 8 points per game, down from where he's been throughout his career, but love Bettis, and so he's been a nice off-the-ball scorer, shooting 35% from 3-point range for Northwestern State. Not necessarily a lot of size down low, but you do have Willie Wilson giving you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Lee Dort and company for Cal should be able to win that battle down low, as Dort, along with Matty Sissoko, were able to combine for a little bit over 13 rebounds per game. And for Cal, to their credit, they do shoot 37% from 3-point range. So even though Northwestern State looking to play a little bit more of a slow and control game, I do think that you're going to get plenty of scoring in this game. I set my total at 150.5. Looking at the overhand, I do think that Northwestern State has enough to hold in this game, despite the fact that they've got not necessarily a ton with regards to low post, as you've still got BJ Omot and company dealing with quite a few injuries for California. So I'm going to be in on the points with Northwestern and the total over 306.583, 306.584. Jacksonville is going to be playing against East Tennessee State. ETSU is a favorite of between 2.5 to 3 points. So on game between 143.5 to a 144, and said ETSU is a 2-point favorite. So being able to get 3, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Jacksonville. Jacksonville is turning over a little bit of a new leaf. Under this current coaching staff, they've been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball typically. Now they're in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. ETSU, they've been playing a little bit more of an offensive geared game as well. ETSU still right around about 215th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But last year, ETSU was well outside the top 275 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. And Kamari Peterson, great name, he's been able to help this team ascend, 18 points, shooting nearly 40% from 3-point range, 4.3 assists and 1.7 turnovers per game. Still have quite a bit down low. Karen Boyd has given the team about 6.5 to 7 rebounds per game along Jaden Seymour, and Seymour, with his versatility at 6'7", has been able to supply the team with 17.5 points per game. He is currently shooting 40% from 3-point range. I do think that there's going to be a bit of regression with this, though. And then conversely for Jacksonville, I love the fact that you got Robert McCray, a guy that was able to give you about 20 points per contest last season. Has been turning the ball over a little bit too much with about 3.5 turnovers per game, but he's been able to do a nice job of being able to get the ball to his other guards to be able to just take the load off of him a little bit, as Zeke Nwochi along with Stephon Payne have been able to do a nice job down low. They've been able to combine for about 11 rebounds per game, but it's all been about finding that off-the-ball scorer like they have now found in Zach Bell. Bell has been able to give the team about 30% 3-point shooting, but generates a steal and a half per game, has been able to chip in there 11-plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. 3-point shooting percentage has been able to come along for the ride a little bit with them as well for this Jacksonville unit, even though they have been cranking up their tempo a little bit more. Still has been a relatively solid team with regards to their defense. 67 points or fewer allowed in 2 of their last 4 games, with the other games coming against Florida Atlantic and also Georgia. And for ETSU, this has been a team that has been all over the place with regards to their defense, giving up 57 points or fewer in 2 of their last 4 games. They also gave up 96 to Wichita State along the way as well. I do think that for ETSU, they're going to be able to do a solid job down low, but I do like what Robert McCray is able to provide for this Jacksonville backcourt. I think that that'll be enough to be able to keep them in this game. I'm willing to take anything north of a deuce here with Jacksonville. I do think that both of these teams get a little bit back more to their defensive roots. I did set my total at 143.5. I think we've just gone a little bit too far down low with regards to the total with the tempo change that we've seen with Jacksonville, and I do think that there's a chance for some late game fouling as well. So in on the 143.5 over, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Jacksonville. 306.585, 306.586. Bellarmine plays also Ball State. Ball State is a 1 to 1.5 point road favorite. Total on this game between 144 to 144.5, and with Ball State, set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5 with them, as For Bellarmine, this team is just not doing a great job of taking care of the ball. Turn the ball over north of 13 times per contest as a team that's well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. That is not a combination that really jives. They lose so much of their pieces from a season ago. You do have Ben Johnson returning, who was able to give the team double figures a season ago, so that's been nice for them. But also with Ball State, even though they did lose quite a bit of their backcourt from a season ago as well, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up and get the job done because they've also got Peyton Sparks back, who's starting to find his sea legs a little bit more. 2 seasons ago was averaging for the team 7+ rebounds per game, only about 8 points, 4.5 rebounds this season, but you've been able to get 48% 3-point shooting out of Wasan Gorecito, who's been able to give you 10 points per contest. It's a Ball State team that overall they're shooting just 30.5% from 3-point. I think that there should be some positivity here. Mikey Pearson, he does give you good versatility. Last year shot 36% from 3, more around 25%. This year 11 points, 7 boards per contest, giving you some nice size there. And then you've been able to get north of 16 points per game out of Jeremiah Hill. He has come up from the non-D1 ranks, and he has been very rock solid in this backcourt. For a Ball State team that's doing a good job taking care of the ball, only about 11.5 turnovers per game. They get to go up against the Bellarmine defense that year in and year out since they've joined the D1 ranks. They've been well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and right now for Bellarmine, 352nd with this regard. Not that Ball State has been amazing. They're about 284th with this regard, but they're actually giving up fewer points per possession when they are on the road rather than at home, with Bellarmine's inability to be able to take care of the ball. And Billy Smith, a former Ball State transfer, give the team 11.5 point shooting, 37.5% from 3-point range. I do think that Ball State does find a way to be able to get the job done in a game that I think is going to be involving quite a bit of scoring. I do think the Ball State is going to start to erupt from 3-point range. Set by total 146.5 and on the over. I do like Ball State laying the very small number, 306, 587, 306, 588. It is Arkansas, Central Arkansas, doing battle from Simmons Bank Arena. This is a neutral court environment with Arkansas a 27 to a 28-point favorite. Totals between 147.5 to a 148. Set Arkansas is a 31.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. We saw them show their might against Michigan, and a lot of people might think that this might be a little bit of a sleepy spot for them, but I don't think that Cal is going to let them let up against a Central Arkansas team that is outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Central Arkansas does have a few guys that are able to stroke it from 3-point range, as Lane Taylor has been able to shoot 35% from 3, 17 points, 5 boards per contest. Central Arkansas for the 15th straight year, a top 80 team in terms of total possessions per game, and they're only turning the ball over 12 times per contest. The problem is they had a lot of rebounding a season ago that has just gone by the wayside. Obangi Itom, he last year was giving you about 7 boards per contest. That's down to about 3 rebounds per game. Elias Cato is able to give you about 5 boards, 14.5 points per game, but you need a little bit more out of him, as outside of Taylor, each of your next top 5 scorers are shooting below 30% from 3-point range. And then this is an Arkansas unit that just has so much versatility, as you finally saw Jonas Adu fully healthy in that game against Michigan. He was really cooking, and that's big because you've already got Abdou Thiero, give you 2 steals, 6 boards, 18 points per game. Not a guy that's going to stretch the floor and really hit threes, but DJ Wagner has been able to come along for the ride a little bit as well. As Boogie Flan has been the main guard with 16 points, does a nice job being able to dish it out, but for Wagner, 16 points, 5 assists to 2 turnovers in that game against Michigan. He's been able to pop off, and he's been able to give the team quite a bit more in the backcourt. And then additionally, you've got the versatility of Trevon Brazil at 6'9", is able to light it up from 3. John L. Davis is still only giving the team 9 points per contest. Big Z continues to give you blocks at 7 feet tall. He's able to shoot it well from 3-point range. Central Arkansas, in my opinion, is just going to get completely plastered in this game. I did set my total at 159.5. Central Arkansas playing at an up-tempo pace, and they have been absolutely terrible on defense, giving up 82 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games. And Arkansas really starting to hit another gear on offense. So I'm willing to take a shot on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 31 here with Arkansas. 306, 589, 306, 590. NJIT plays us Wagner. Wagner does find themselves as 2.5 to 3-point favorites, and today's game is a 118.5 to 119, and set my total 117.5. I'm in on the under with this Wagner team. They're outside the top 330 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're playing at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball. NJIT well outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So they're going to have the best score in this game. That'd be Tariq Francis, about 19.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists per game for an NJIT team that they do shoot 76% of the free throw line, but a low-tempo team with about 13 turnovers per game. You've had Sebastian Robinson supply the team with 12 points per contest, but he's shooting about 23.5% for 3-point range. And for NJIT, what's more concerning about them, they just don't have a lot down low. Tim Moore Jr. has been able to provide about 5.5 rebounds per game. That's about it. Meanwhile, RJ Green has had good versatility for Wagner. He's been able to supply the team with 9.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. This is a Wagner team that, despite their offense being so poor, they do turn the ball over 13 times per game. They actually shoot about 35% from 3-point. They don't have that one main rebounder, but the whole has been greater than the sum of its parts down low. And then on the flip side, for NJIT, you've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Levi Lawal. That's been hurting this team quite a bit for NJIT. While they are a team that has been very lackadaisical on offense, they're also about 250th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that's really where the issue comes in. If you're able to be good at one or the other, that can help offset a little bit. And this Wagner team, when they've been on the road, they've had a negative rebound percentage, but NJIT has been getting completely dominated on glass as well at 308th. There's just too much that's working against NJIT in this spot. Even though they do have a nice top flight scorer in Tariq Francis, I do think that the overall collective of Wagner, especially with Javier Esquera, giving you an assist-to-turnover ratio north of 2, going to be able to win out in this spot. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Wagner. Set my total at a 117.5. Think that you get a slow bleeder and a slog of a game. So in on the under and in on Wagner. 306-591, 306-592. It is Florida International. They are on the road against Stetson. Stetson is a home underdog of 3 points. So this game is 147 to 147.5. I actually did do a write-up for this game, and I am going to be writing up the over. I set my total at 152.5. And Florida International, I'm willing to lay up to 4 with them. This Stetson team has been absolutely terrible on defense. Outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've always been very vulnerable from 3-point range, and they've always been a rock-solid 3-point shooting team. Even though they lost pretty much each other top 6 scores from the season ago, they're still shooting as a collective about 34% from 3-point range. You've gotten about 11.5 points, 5.5 boards out of Josh Massey, and he's been able to shoot 46% from 3-point range, 38.5% 3-point shooting out of Abramo Kenka. So these guys have been able to step up in a big way, but you really don't have a lot down low, as Massey and Kenka are really your top rebounders with about 5.5 rebounds per game apiece. And Florida International, they've had a tough time being able to grab boards all throughout the really coaching era that they have here, but you've had Jaden Brewer step up as the main guy, 3 assists, 6 boards, 14.5 points per game. It's a team that has collective. They only do shoot about 27% from 3-point range, but I do think that should be going northward. You've been able to get a little bit more in the interior with 6'11" Vinay Slasham, who's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, like the way that he's been able to perform. Jonathan Ibar, he's got a little bit of versatility, has been missing for a few games, but was able to get out there in that game against Florida Atlantic about a week or so ago. 10 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range at right around about 6'9", and you've been able to get a little bit more in terms of the backcourt play from Ashton Williamson, who comes in from the state of Indiana, actually. 8.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. This is still a Florida national team that has been able to do a nice job of generating turnovers, and typically they try to turn defense into offense for Florida National. They've been much better defensively this year than they have been in the past. Meanwhile, Stetson, I don't think that they have held a D1 opponent to less than 71 points this far this season, so I do think that Florida National going to put up there a big number and be able to cover this spread. I'm willing to lay up to 4 with Florida International, and I do think that this is going to be an up and down game. Semi-total 152.5, so writing up the over. 306-593, 306-594. It is Austin P, and they're going to be playing us to Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois just find themselves as 2.5 to the 3-point road favorites. On this game between 133 to 134, and with Austin P, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points, so I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line for Southern Illinois. I like Scott Nagy as a coach, but feels like this team is still trying to get acclimated to his system, because in the past few years, they've been one of the bottom teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and obviously you've got a lot of moving pieces with this team, but Kennard Davis is one of the main holdovers from a season ago. He's been able to supply the team with about 14.5 points per contest, and Jared Hensley, their top rebounder, is back from a season ago, 10.5 points, 7.5 boards per game. But for Scott Nagy's system to be successful, they need to turn the ball over less than 13.5 times per game. They're shooting just 33% from 3-point range, and they have been well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. While Austin P has the best player out there on the floor, and LJ Thomas comes in from NC State, 3 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 18 points per game. For it's a Austin P team that shoots just 32% from 3-point range, but Austin P also does a great job of being able to get their slow grinder pace as well. For Austin P, in terms of total possessions per game, currently 335th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Southern Illinois, they're looking to fly. They're in the top 80 with this regard. You've been dealing with the injuries on this Austin P team all season, along with Isaac Haney being one of the main of them. He is currently out after he was supplying the team with 13 points per contest, but stepping up for the team, being able to give a bit from the outside at about 35.5% 3-point shooting is Takeo Carpenter. He's been a little bit hit or miss with regards to his scoring, but he's been able to step into a bigger role after being a junior college transfer, and he's been able to give the team quite a bit of production. I do think that moving forward, Darius Dawson going to be able to do much of the same, as he's been supplying the team with about 4.5 points per game thus far this season, but popped off in their game against Samford, a game where the team scored just 47 points. He had 18 of them in 15 minutes. 6'6", non-D1 transfer, who I think think has a lot of upside, and he's going to be able to do a nice job. I'll be able to give this team a little bit of force on the outside, and I do think that they take it to a Southern Illinois team that still feels like it's a little bit of a work in progress for them after all the changes that they made. So I'm going to be willing to take Austin Peay right on the money line. I do think that this is going to be a bit more of an up-tempo game, set by total 136, so also in on the over. 36-595, 36-596. West Virginia plays as Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman is an underdog of 25 points. Total on this game, it is 135.5 to a 136. I set my line at 23.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Bethune-Cookman. Actually, a relatively spirited effort from Bethune-Cookman a few nights ago against Virginia. Problem was, if you took the points, you did not get the cover because things went down the toilet bowl in the final 10 or so minutes, but you got Brayon Freeman, who's been able to give the team 14-plus points per contest, duplicating what he did over at Rhode Island a few seasons ago. Down low, you've been able to have Reggie Ward give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. And for West Virginia, even though they've had a lot of early season success, it's not like they're monsters down low. Ronnie Hansberry has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. And I do like Eduardo 3000 Andre, who's been able to give you about a block, 4 boards per contest. But if you're able to get Daniel Ruzan, who comes on over from Weber State, activated just a little bit more. And last year at Weber State, he averaged 11.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Hasn't done quite as much of that this season. That'll provide a lot of upside. You've got G&I Hunt, who is a part of that Oregon State Elite 8 run, who's been dealing with injury all season long, so that's been a little bit of an issue for the Bethune-Cookman backcourt. Big reason why they're shooting just 31.5% from 3. Big reason why they're outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but they're doing a nice job being able to mix and match with the guys stepping in, and Trey Thomas, who's really been able to do a nice job of helping this offense not skip a beat with Hunt's absence. 12 points per game, shooting 38.5% from 3-point range, double figures in 4 of the last 5 games. I do think that Bethune-Cookman holds in there despite the fact that West Virginia has a very good duo in Javon Small along Tucker DeVries, combining for 35 points, 9 boards, 7 assists, 4 steals, with DeVries currently shooting 47% from 3-point range. But for West Virginia, outside of their main starting 5, you really don't have a lot of depth. Toby Okani at 6'7" has been able to shoot about 37.5% from 3-point range. And this has been a Bethune-Cookman team that has had their difficulties, to say the least, in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. But with Bethune-Cookman, one of their main things has been getting dominated down low, as right now they are ranking 348th with regards to rebound rate. And with West Virginia not necessarily having an ideal size, I do think that that'll allow them to hold in this game. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot here with Bethune-Cookman, willing to take the 25, and did set my total 137.5. I do think that both of these teams going to be quite effective with their offense. So in on the over and the points with Bethune-Cookman, 306-597, 306-598. It is North Florida, and they play us to UNC Greensboro. Greensboro is a 1-point road favorite. Total on this game is 146.5, and I do like this line for UNC Greensboro. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with them. For North Florida, had a bunch of nice triumphs early on during the season, but I feel like they might have just caught some teams at the right time. And if you're able to hit your threes if you're North Florida, that always makes you very lethal. But now they go up against a UNC Greensboro team that they themselves are a team that is very much geared towards being able to take and hit 3-point shots, and they themselves are just a better defensive team as well. With this UNC Greensboro team, they're inside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for UNC Greensboro, they've done a nice job being able to lock things down from 3-point range, as they're 26th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That goes up to 26.7% 3-point shooting for opponents when they hit the road. For North Florida, you've obviously been able to do a nice job of having good, clean offense, fewer than 11 turnovers per game, with Josh Harris being one of the main guys in that backcourt. 16 points per game, shooting 54.9% from 3-point range. And for the team, 3 out of their top 4 scorers, you shoot at least 40% from 3-point range. You've had Nate Lateris, Liam Murphy have some versatility, combined for about 26 points per contest, combined to shoot about 44% from 3-point range. But with North Florida, as we know, let's see if they give it up from 3-point range, 287th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And Keenan Giles, who comes on over after he was originally under the tutelage of Mike Jones, you ask who, and I say Mike Jones, the current coach of UNC Greensboro when he was at Radford, has come in from Radford, 17 points, steal and a half per contest, shooting 43% from 3 points for a Greensboro team that they turn the ball over less than 11 times per game. They shoot about 34% from 3-point range, and we just have a little bit more on the interior with a breath of fresh life from Jalen Breath. 8 points, 8 boards per contest. It's a Greensboro team that they're not necessarily going to force the issue in terms of generating steals or anything like that, but with the way that they guard the 3-point line, with the way that Donovan Atwell has also been able to give this team 12 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, I think the Greensboro just does a good job of being able to lock down North Florida from 3-point range to get the job done. I did set my total of 145.5. Here at the 146.5, I like the under because I like the way that Greensboro guards the 3, and I'm willing to lay up to 3 with UNC Greensboro. 306.5 299, 306, 600. Mississippi State and McNeese. They play from Candace Bank Arena, neutral court environment. Mississippi State 9 to 9.5 point favorites. Total this game is 143.5. Did set my total at a 143.5 myself, so going to be waiting on a little bit of line movement. This was a opener of 143, and if we get down to a 143 or less, that'll be my buy point on the over. And when it comes to Mississippi State, this team just absolutely mauls on the glass. Like, this is one of your top rebound rate teams in all of college basketball, has been since Chris Jans took over, and you've got three guys giving you at least 6.2 rebounds per game. Michael Nwoko along Charles Matthews both give you about 7.5 points, combined 13 rebounds per game, and Keshawn Murphy has been that main man down low. 8 boards, a block, 11.5 points per game. Is able to pop it from three, doesn't necessarily pop it well, but that's why you've got Joshua Hubbard shooting 43% from the outside, 19 points per game, and that's a big reason why Mississippi State has become a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for McNeese, it's been a little bit touch and go for them to begin the season. Not quite as much success from three-point range as you'd expect, shooting 30.5% for three, with Christian Shoemate actually being one of your top three-point shooters, and Allen Breed looked like they were going to get him back, had him out there for 2 games. He scored 35 points, and now he's out with injury once again. So Sincere Parker has really been coming off the bench and has been their top scorer with about 15.5 points per contest, like what you're able to get out of Joe Charles down low, 8 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. But with Shoemate, with him having a little bit more versatility, shooting it from three-point range, that has led to him just not generating as many rebounds as he has in past years. That's where I think that Mississippi State is really going to be able to take hold of this game. And it's been a McNeese team that just really hasn't been able to find their bearings with regards to backcourt, trying to be able to find that main facilitator. As right now, you've got Amari Cooper, who's been able to give you about 4 assists per contest, but really doesn't give you a lot on the scoring front. Meanwhile, for Mississippi State, this continues to be one of the best perimeter defenses in the country in terms of generating turnovers, as this team has been able to get about 10 steals per contest. But if they don't generate a steal, they do leave themselves open from three-point range. They're ranking about 300th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. A little bit of it has been bad variance as well, but I do think that this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game, because I do think that Mississippi State turns that defense into offense. So at a 143 or less, I do like the over. But with Mississippi State, even though I do think that they get the job done here, do feel like if we could get to double figures, I'd be willing to take a shot on McNeese. I set my line at a 9.5 right now at that 9. That would be the exact max buy point on Mississippi State, but I'm trying to see if we can get a 10, perhaps a 10.5 to take a shot on McNeese. So looking there, and at a 143 or less in on the over. 306-601, 306-602. St. Francis, Pennsylvania on the road against Niagara. Niagara 3.5 to 4 point favorites, so that's between 137.5 to a 138.5, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot on Niagara. I did set them at 6.5 point favorites. For St. Francis of Pennsylvania, it's looking much better than it was a season ago. They were just a band of misfit pieces, to say the least, but still a lot of work to do. And for the St. Francis PA team, you just don't necessarily have a ton down low for this bunch. Bobby Rosenberger has had to do it all. 6'5", do-it-all guy, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 14 points per contest, shooting about 32% for 3, and to his credit, 15 plus points in each of the last 4 games. And for this Niagara team, even though they lose their 7-footer and Harlan Obiana from a season ago, and they're left a little bit more vulnerable down low, Jalen Martinez, who comes over from UC Riverside, has lent versatility, 5.5 boards, 8.5 points per game, and Odolome Elodun, who's a 6'5", do-it-all sort of dynamo, has been able to give you 11.5 points, 2 assists, 6 rebounds per game. Lots of versatility for a Niagara team that overall they're shooting about 34.5% from three-point range. This is a team that under Greg Pauls, they've very much been trying to take as efficient of shots as possible. Lots of threes, lots of shots around the basket, and they've been masters at it. Jaden Marshall, who comes on over from Omaha, he's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. He's got some great size, but Valparaiso transfer in Jahari Williamson has really been the X factor from the outside, shooting 43% from three-point range. Both of these teams do leave themselves quite a bit vulnerable on the defensive side of things as well. Both of these teams outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For St. Francis of Pennsylvania, to their credit, they're about 122nd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, we've got a Niagara team that has been lying a little bit more from the outside, allowing opponents to shoot 36% from the outside. But the question for St. Francis becomes, who's going to be the guy that parries those shots? They shoot 32% as a collective, and they've been dealing with Jeremy Clayville being in and out of the lineup a little bit the last few games, and they've had Ace Talbert, who's been one of their top scorers, shooting 38% from three-point range, out for about a month. So that's left St. Francis of Pennsylvania really depleted in the backcourt. They need to try to win this game with Rosenberger, and pretty much Rosenberger along with Mr. Riley Parker give you about 4.5 assists, 10.5 points per game, shoots about 31% from three-point range, but I think that the lack of healthy bodies and lack of main three-point shooters are currently out of the lineup for St. Francis, Pennsylvania. Really going to nip them in the bud here. So did set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Niagara. Did set my total at a 138.5, so at the 137.5 in on the over. 3 of 6.603, 3 of 6.604. Albany is going to be playing us at Drexel. Drexel does find themselves as a 1-point road favorite. Total is between 145 to a 146. Did set my total 138.5. I'm in on the under for Albany. They've been playing a little bit more quickly recently, but they actually started out playing at a super slow tempo, and you've had a Drexel team that year in and year out, they rank in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're doing a really nice job of being able to take away the three-point arc as well. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and even though Albany does have back guys like Amari Marshall and company that were out towards the beginning part of the season, I just like this Drexel team and the way that they've been able to play down low, as well as they lose Amari Williams from the season ago. Cole Hargrave has not missed a beat. He's been able to give the team 9 rebounds per game. And this is a Drexel team that's much better offensively than they were a season ago, with having a north of 40% three-point shooter, Kobe McGee, leading the way with 2 assists, 5 boards, about 16 points per game. Additionally, they've been able to get some nice facilitation out of more of a pass-first, defense-oriented sort of point guard in Jason Drake. About 8 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists per contest. He's been able to really do a nice job taking care of the ball with 2 turnovers or fewer in each of the last 5 games, as well. And Yame Butler, who 2 seasons ago shot north of 40% from 3, still stuck on about 33% this season. I do think that that's going to be going northward. And then for Albany, losing Jonathan Beagle down low is big, because right now they've only got one guy that's able to give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, and Justin Neely, staying 6'6", 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. And Byron Joshua, who comes on over from Alcorn State, he's been rock solid in the backcourt, shooting 34% from 3, 2 steals, 12.5 points per game. And this is an Albany team that's one of the tops in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Drexel, they're more just playing in your grill, good, tight, tenacious defense. I do think that that style of Drexel is going to be able to win out, because I think that they do a nice job protecting the ball. That'll allow them to be able to get their tempo in this game. Semi-total 138.5. I like the under, and I do like Drexel on this number, as I made them a 2.5 point favorite. 306-605, 306-606. Mount St. Mary's is playing also Loyola Maryland. Loyola Maryland does find themselves as 4.5 point underdogs. So on this game is 141 with Loyola Maryland. I did set them at 7.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to lay with Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. They've been turning the ball over north of 14 times per game, but not like this Loyola Maryland team is getting a lot out of their backcourt either. Milo Selic has been very versatile with 9 boards, 14.5 points per game. He's able to give you a little bit of three-point shooting, but hasn't necessarily shot it well. But for Loyola Maryland, they're shooting 28.5% from three-point range. They themselves have been having all sorts of issues on the defensive side of things as well. They're not really generating a lot of turnovers. They're about 173rd in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage as well. Other than Elich, you've got the other Elich and Vahelo Elich, who's been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. He's the only other guy in the roster that's giving you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. And the other Elich, the second best scorer, I completely butchered his name the first time around, he's the only other guy in the roster that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. You've been able to have Braden Speed give you about 3 assists and a steal per contest, but you're just not getting a lot out of this backcourt. Meanwhile, Dallas Hobbs, he's been able to do a rock-solid job for this Mount St. Mary's team of supplying 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 14 points per game. Shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and Xavier Lipscomb, a career 40% three-point shooter, should be able to see a rise in his 26% three-point shooting, but Mount St. Mary's is winning via down-low horsepower, as you've got a trio of guys, Terrell Art, Joey Cardelia, Londillo Egbayo, who are combining for about 33 points and 21 rebounds. That's the way that they were able to make their NCAA tournament runs a few seasons ago, and being able to get some of these guards like a Camelo Pacheco going a little bit more, as well as he's been able to supply the team with 6+ points in 3 of the last 4 games. I do think that that's going to be enough to take it to a Loyola Maryland team that's just not getting a lot going in that backcourt. I did set my total to where I'm going to be in on this total under. I set my total 135.5. I just don't think that Loyola Maryland does their part with regards to the total, and with Mount St. Mary's, I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 306-607, 306-608. It is Utah, and they play us at Radford. Radford is a 19-point underdog. Your total on this game, it is between 142.5 to 143. So my line is 16.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Radford. Fully recognize that this is a little bit of a far cry from the Radford defenses that we saw under Mike Jones a few seasons ago, but they've been able to do a nice job getting out to the 9-2 start. We've seen this Utah team shoot well north of 40% from three-point range at home with Madison Square. Gabe Madison has been able to give you 21.5 points, 2 assists, steal per contest, shooting 42.5% from 3, and his brother Mark shooting 46 from the outside with 11 points per game. They should be able to win that battle down low with being able to have Lawson Lovering coming back in the lineup in the last 3 games as he missed the first 5 games of the season. 7.5 rebounds per game. And Caleb Lohner was playing for the football team, I believe, because they had said that he was leaving to play for football. Now he's back on the basketball side. First game back, he was able to give the team 8 points. He was a guy that was over at Baylor a few seasons ago, so very interesting story there. But on the flip side for Radford, they've got their main headline scorer in Jarvis Moss, giving them 15.5 points per game. It's a team that overall shoots about 35% from 3-point range, but they do a nice job down low with Josiah Harris being able to give you about 8 or so rebounds per game. You've been able to get some relatively good facilitation as well out of Brandon Macklin, who at 6'5" is a little bit of a taller point guard, 2.5 assists, 6.5 boards, 9 points per game. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range himself. This is a Utah team that they very much do live and die by the 3-point shot, and for Radford, it's very imperative that they guard the arc right now. They've been allowing opponents to shoot 36.5% from 3-point range, which has been relatively rough for them, but I do think that they're going to be able to lock it down a little bit more. I do think that there's going to be a little bit more bad 3-point shooting variance coming through for Utah, and I do think that Radford does a nice job of being able to get some points down low. I do think that David Early, who's been able to shoot 38.5% from 3, was a double-figure scorer 2 seasons ago at Tennessee Tech, going to get going as well. So did set myself with a little bit of a higher total, even though Radford has been playing a little bit more of a slow and controlled style. 70 points or fewer allowed in each of their last 5 games. Did set my total at a 144.5 with the way that they're guarding the arc. So going to be willing to take the points, but also in on this total over. 306-609, 306-610. It is Eastern Kentucky playing us at Eastern Illinois. In the Battle of Eastern Kentucky is a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite. Totals between 141 to a 142, and with Eastern Kentucky, it's not the best 9.5-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take 10 plus here with Eastern Illinois. With Eastern Illinois, the big key is Cooper Jacoby and the fact that he's been able to give this team north of 6 rebounds per game. He last year was very rock solid for the team when they had a nice first half of the season. Right when he went down with injury is right when the team went straight down the toilet bowl, and recognize that this is just a 3-6 Eastern Illinois team that is outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've had Nikhil Shelton really do a nice job of running this offense, giving out 2.5 assists, 18 points per game, and it's an Eastern Illinois team that has been able to cut down on the turnovers, 12 turnovers per contest, while being a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But this is an Eastern Kentucky team that they very much are seeking to be able to generate turnovers themselves. And for Eastern Kentucky, it doesn't sound like much, but last year they allowed opponents to shoot 38.7% from 3-point range, down to about 35.2% this year, with Devontae Blanton leading the way in darn near everything. 15.5 points, 6 boards, 3.3 assists per contest, shooting it well from 3-point range, while George Kimball III, he has been a top 20 player in all of college basketball in steals per game. 14.5 points, shoots 37.5% from 3-point range to go along with it. Major Wool has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Team isn't quite as good of a shot blocking team as they were a season ago, but still doing a relatively solid job holding up on the glass. But I do think that with what Cooper Jacoby brings to the table for Eastern Illinois, with Eastern Illinois being a team that does a relatively solid job of being able to take care of the ball as well, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this one against an Eastern Kentucky team that is very hit or miss with regards to their defense. They're either giving up 78 plus or they're giving up fewer than 70. There's really not a lot of in between, but I do think that Eastern Illinois, that's just enough to stay within single digits. Did set my total at a 145.5. We have seen this Eastern Kentucky team look to play very much up and down. You got an Eastern Illinois team that's been a little bit less than efficient on defense as well. So in on the over and at 10 plus, taking those points with Eastern Illinois. 3-6-6-11, 3-6-6-12. Prairie View is going to be on the road against Loyola Marymount. Loyola Marymount is a 20.5 point favorite, and your total on this game between 157.5 to a 158. Did set my total 157.5. At a 158, I'm in on the under. Now, Prairie View playing at a top 30 pace in terms of total possessions per game, and they're well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that with Loyola Marymount, a team that's been looking to play a little bit more slowly, that they're going to get this game calmed down just a little bit. And I think that Will Johnson is going to be able to do a good job of just being able to, shall we say, slice through this Prairie View defense. He's been able to supply 15 points, 3.5 assists, shooting 35% from 3. All in all for Loyola Marymount, they only turn the ball over about 10 times per contest, and Prairie View is a team that they live and die by being able to generate turnovers. This year they've been dying a lot by not being able to generate as many, as they're down to about 8 steals per contest, but we do have Taj Petaway, who's been able to give the team 15 points, shooting north of 38% from 3-point range. And Nick Anderson, he's been able to give this Prairie View team 19 points per contest. This Prairie View team has actually been able to give you some relatively good offensive production. Now for Prairie View, they also do allow themselves to be open to giving up a lot of 3-point looks. This is a Loyola Marymount team that they themselves have been a little bit rough in terms of their 3-point shooting defense, allowing opponents to shoot about 35% from the outside. So that's been a little bit of an issue. But I do think that this is going to be a Prairie View team that's going to be looking looking themselves in the mirror and realizing that they need to slow things down just a little bit, as they've got Orlando Horton, who's able to give you about 2.5 assists per game, but he has seen a quite big drop-off with regards to his scoring in the last game against Mississippi State. He went out after just 1 or 2 minutes with an injury, so that means that Jordan Tillman is going to need to take over the mantle a little bit more in the backcourt. He's been able to give the team 8.5 points per game. Was a relatively good facilitator and a relatively good scorer over at Florida A&M 2 seasons ago as well, but I do think that for Prairie View, this is going to be a team that's going to get slowed down by a loyal Marymount team that has given up 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, gave up just 63 to Belmont about a week and a half ago, so I do think that they're going to get a little bit more of their tempo, but I do think that Prairie View has a shooting to be able to hold in this game. Semi-total 157.5, here at the 158, in on the under, and I'm going to take 20 plus 0 with Prairie View. 3-6-6-13, 3-6-6-14. Nevada plays host to Texas Southern. Texas Southern, a 23.5 to a 24-point dog. Total on this game between 140.5 to a 141. So Nevada is a 20.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Texas Southern. Texas Southern has been one of your lesser covered teams in all of college basketball, but I do think that they're going to hold up here against a Nevada team that we're starting to see a little bit of 3-point shooting regression with them. Overall for the season, still shooting north of 40% from the outside, with Kobe Sanders and Nick Davidson combining shooting north of 43% from 3 points. Between the two of them, they've been able to supply 30 points per game. Davidson, your top rebounder, with about 6.5 rebounds per game. Sanders, 4.3 assists per game. Outside these two guys, it's been about like 8 or so points per contest out of Brian Love, 9 points per game out of Trey Coleman, and you really don't have a lot of depth with regards to this team outside of that. So that's been a little bit of an issue for them. For the Texas Southern team, whole has been greater than the sum of its parts with regards to the rebounding numbers, as you've been able to have Kenny Hunter give the team about 6 boards, 10 points per game, and then out there in the backcourt, you've got nice facilitation, a steal and a half, 5 assists, 14.5 points per game out of Kevon McLean, who's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3. This is a Texas Southern team that rarely shoots the ball from 3-point range this year. They've been shooting more around 33.5% from 3-point range. This even with Jalen Jackson Posey, who comes over from Stephen F. Austin, where 2 seasons ago shot 45% from 3, being a big disappointment, shooting only about 20% from 3-point range, but do need to get a little bit more down low of this team, as you've only been able to get when he's been out there on the floor. About 8 points, 2.5 rebounds per game out of Grayson Carter, who's been dealing with a little bit of injury himself, but is now back in the lineup. He should be able to give this team something at 6'10". You've been able to have Kenny Granger, who give you about a steal, 8 points per game, but again, need a little bit more than the 4 rebounds per game that he's been able to supply. And Nevada has been one of your better rebound rate teams in all of college basketball recently, but I do think that for Texas Southern, they're going to be able to hold up. I do think that Texas Southern are going to start to ratchet up a little bit more defensively, as that's typically been their forte. And this year, Texas Southern, with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, clocking in 332nd in all of college basketball. But that said, did set my line at a 20.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I did set my total 152.5. Do think that both of these teams get some open looks from distance, so going to be in on the over. And we wrap things up with 3-6-6-15, 3-6-6-16. It is Hawaii. They play us at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi is an underdog, 3.5 points. Total on this game is 145 with Hawaii. I did set them as 3.5 point favorites. It's actually opened up at 2. If we could get back down to about a 3, like I saw a lot of books open up at, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Hawaii. This has been a team that's been very much looking a lot more to the low post play thus far this season, as Tanner Christensen has been able to give you about 6 to 7 rebounds per game. He comes in from Utah Tech, and then additionally, you've got Gatias Nepasikas, who was a starter over at Xavier last season. He's actually been able to give the team nice versatility. Stands right around about 6'8", 6'9". He's been able to supply this team with right around about 14.6 at board, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range for a Hawaii team that overall they're shooting about 33.5% from distance. It's been a Hawaii team that typically has been a little bit more guard oriented. This year we have seen a big reversal of that, as for Hawaii they're allowing opponents to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range, but just 29% at home. Obviously on the island you've got a big advantage, and this is a Corpus Christi team that is in the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are in the top 55 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. And Gary Clark has done a nice job leading the way. 14 points, 6 boards per contest. Corpus Christi last year was a mess from 3-point range. This year they're shooting more around 33% from 3, but this might be the difference in the game. They shoot just 61% of the free throw line. I like what Owen Dees is able to provide. He supplied the team with 9 points, 5 boards per contest. Isaac Williams has been rock solid in that backcourt as well, but that's their main facilitator in Williams. He has missed the last 3 games due to injury, and you can tell that Corpus Christi has been a little bit more herky-jerky with regards to their offense ever since then. They played against Prairie View, so they got a big number up there, but have scored fewer than 70 points in their previous 2 games ever since then for this Hawaii Rainbow Warriors team. They got bludgeoned when they were on the mainland against Long Beach State along with Grand Canyon, so I do think that their offense going to be able to fire on all cylinders once again. I did set my total, though, at a 143.5. Without having Williams in the backcourt for Corpus Christi, does cause things to be a little bit more disjointed. It causes them to play a little bit more slowly, and I do think that Hawaii is going to look to win that battle on the glass. I think that they're going to be able to do so. One to lay up to 3 with Hawaii, and here at a 145, I'm in on the under, and that'll wrap things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season on this podcast, which means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.